Ms. Black, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Galbraith.
Present.
Vice Mayor White.
Here.
Councilmember Kroll.
Here.
Doreen.
Present.
Pitts.
Present.
Okay, at 4 o'clock, the City Council held a closed session with its city attorney, and the city attorney will now describe the closed session.
The City Council did meet in closed session this afternoon to discuss those three items designated on today's agenda as items 2A, B, and C. The first, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, whether to initiate litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D4, one case. No reportable action was taken with respect to that discussion. The second matter, item 2B, was conference with legal counsel in existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9D1 to consider the case Citizens Voice St. Helena, Susan Kenward and Jeff Ellsworth versus City of St. Helena, City Council of St. Helena, Napa County Superior Court case number 2665618. The City Council did authorize the City Attorney to defend that lawsuit. The case will be defended pursuant to the condition of approval that was imposed on the project applicant in that matter. That was the Davies Winery applicant. And that condition of approval requires the project applicant to defend and indemnify the city in any such litigation. So that defense will be paid for by the Davies project applicant. The lawsuit is a claim made under CEQA and under the city's general plan and zoning ordinance, asserting violations of both. The third matter is item 2C on today's agenda, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, Government Code Section 54956.9D2, significant exposure to litigation in one potential case. Excuse me, I sound a little like Darth Vader there. In one potential case, there was no reportable action taken with respect to that matter as well.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is public forum. Members of the public are entitled to speak on matters of municipal concern not on the agenda during public forum. Each person's comments shall be limited to 3 minutes, and Ms. Black is without her buzzer, so we'll watch for her hand signal. Each person is entitled to speak on any non-agendized item only once at any meeting. Brief questions by council members for clarification may be posed and answered, and council members may make requests that items be placed on future agendas, but in accordance with the state law, no substantive discussion or action may take place unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. So the question is, does anybody wish to speak at public forum, and would you please state your name?
Hi, my name is Jeff Ellsworth. I'm on Sylvaner Avenue. I brought my own timepiece. I came down here tonight to talk about our great public library. What a great resource it is. I went down there recently and found a book on the War of 1812. They also have computers at the library, which is a great resource. I was down there researching alternative energy, green energy. Can everybody hear me? There was something on those big windmill farms you see in different areas. They were having problems with them. Out in the North Sea, the windmills were freezing up and drawing power back from the grid to warm themselves up. So that wasn't working. There was also another situation with the windmill farms in Missouri where there's some kind of a zoning scandal regarding the windmill farms coming into the area. Residents were feeling the windmill farms were affecting their quality of life, health, and safety, maybe even diminishing home values as they made the area less desirable to live in. I don't quite understand the scandal, but it was some land use tactic where someone tried to pull a fast one on their own community through the zoning or repurposing of the zoning because they saw a chance to make a big profit. And it looks like some of the people involved in this windmill tactic in Missouri, or Kansas, it was Missouri or Kansas, were actually from that community. Like I said, I don't understand how it happened, but it was sort of two main parts. The first is they had to have the knowledge on the change of zoning rules before everybody else. This gave them a head start on learning how to manipulate the new rules to their own advantage. This gave the windmill people the advantage. The second part is where it has to go through the public process very quickly so that the public doesn't have time to understand what's happening. It's like a card trick, sleight of hand, 3-card monte, boom, it's done. And even though the windmill zoning changes may apply to everybody, the ones who know about them first have an advantage. It's like if everyone is signed up for a race, but only one of the runners has the special knowledge of when that race is going to start. So the windmill thing is about timing and information. Whoever has the information first has an advantage. It could be considered cheating. As a matter of fact, it is cheating. So bear with me a moment here. I'm almost done. One of the things that reminded me of was the Martha Stewart thing a few years ago where she got in trouble. But one of the main differences with the Martha Stewart thing and the windmill farm thing is that the Martha Stewart thing, the victims were nameless, faceless investors, Wall Street investors.
Mr. Ellsworth, could you face the council?
Oh, yeah. With the windmill thing, the victims were the people of the community that the perpetrators lived in, their own townspeople, friends, and neighbors. I'll say that again. It was their own townspeople, their friends and neighbors, because the repurposing of zoning can change the value of adjacent property and create unforeseen impacts if not properly studied. I know the people in Missouri don't like this kind of thing. That's what I learned about at the library. I also got a great book about giraffes and one about Ecuador. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellsworth.
Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for the soft microphone cover. Mayor Galbraith, council members, and Manager Phillips. My name is Mark Van Gorder. I'm with Pacific Gas and Electric. And here tonight, I will start my timer as well. I am joined by Senior Manager Dennis McAleese, who's in charge of a leak survey team we call the Super Crew. And I will make some brief comments, and Dennis can follow up with me. But we are preparing for a very standard leak survey process here in the northern part of Napa County. That includes Calistoga, St. Helena, some unincorporated parts of Angwin, Deer Park, and we're here to make a brief presentation under public comment. And Mr. McAleese will be available via phone if you have any additional questions beyond what we can provide tonight. And if you feel, as we have done in the past, that there's issues that we need to further discuss at a future meeting, we can put that on the agenda for some dialogue. But Dennis is here tonight.
Good evening. Thank you all very, very much. So really what we're doing here over the next week or so is our compliance survey and repair, which is something we do every year. This year in this area, we're using state-of-the-art, new, emerging technology from a company called Picaro Surveyor, which is out of Santa Clara. It is substantially more sensitive than traditional leak detection technologies. And the process that we're using, and why we call it Super Crew, is really just a compressed approach, enabling us to come into the area, really conduct all of the survey that's required due to the compliance calendar this year, and then very quickly look at all of the work that we're identifying and driving during this area, look at it from a more holistic view, package it, and execute it in a very quick manner. So really from start to finish, it would be a day or so in the municipality for the survey part, and potentially another day or two for the bundled repair part that would take place a couple weeks after the original survey. It is a new approach. It is something we did pilot all last year and had very good results and a high level of success in the municipalities that we engaged in. That's really kind of it. Any questions?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any,
I'll just say briefly again, I'm going to ask if Dennis can provide to the clerk his business cards, and then any other questions we're happy to answer, and as well Public Works Director Palmer. Thank you.
very well.
Thank you, Mark.
Does anybody else wish to speak at public forum? Yes, please.
Thank you. My name is Adrienne Hain. I'm at 1562 Grayson Avenue. I won't bore you with reading the email that I sent the council this week, yesterday. I'd rather not be redundant about it, but I would like to add just a little bit of an addendum. First, I'd like to once again apologize for coming to the discourse late. As one of the neighbors in the direct zone affected by the Davies project, I frankly didn't know a lot about it except from what I read in the paper and saw in a couple of televised meetings. I presumed there'd be an EIR, which I guess never happened. So when I outlined some of the issues that I saw with this project in my email to you, I would just like to reinforce that the notification and inclusion of the neighbors on Grayson was perhaps a tad lacking. We're used to being involved from the get-go because we're across from the school district. And with every change that's happened with this particular campus, we are always engaged right from the beginning with notices in our mailboxes, knocks on the door by various staff of the school district. And it's always been a very vibrant give and take. So, when none of this transpired, in my recollection, I guess maybe I wasn't home if somebody was knocking on my door, my husband wasn't home. We, as neighbors, would have liked to perhaps have been more engaged in an outreach endeavor by the Davies folks. Obviously, as I talk to neighbors now, everyone is concerned about the sound of the hospitality events that are projected to be conducted outside. We get a lot of sound bombardment from across the way from Farmstead and Long Meadow Ranch from their activities, from Trevina Restaurant when they have outdoor activities, from Velavino when they have outdoor activities. Granted, those are a handful of occasions, but added now with all of the Davies events that are in their permit, we are obviously very concerned. Traffic safety is an amazing worry from our point of view. We see all the kids during the school year, some being pushed in strollers, accompanying their siblings to the primary school, many in cars from the high school, kids that have just gotten their licenses and pulling out, maybe not being all that alert to various traffic hazards. And now all the cars that are coming out of the exit, on Grayson will now be part of their fabric of life. So I'd like you to think about that and the youth of our town on our street. And that also happens in the summer because of now the skateboard park and tennis lessons and adventure day camp. It is a very, very vibrant neighborhood all year round. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak at public forum?
Good evening. My name is Chuck Vondra, and I live in St. Helena. And I want to wish everybody Happy New Year. With Christmas over, I thought I would come and bring my Santa's list of things I'd like to see the city consider as part of the upcoming agendas. And they both have to do with revenue, which I understand is a challenge for a city like ours to pay for everything that we need. We need revenue. And we're always reading about we need a hotel here, we need this to generate revenue. So I want to offer a couple suggestions that aren't new, but I think they're revenue generating suggestions. One of them is something that came out of a meeting I had with member Pitts, several members from our town, where we interviewed the city of Aspen, who had a significant challenge finding homes for the people that worked and lived in the town. And they basically developed a real estate transfer tax, which generated a lot of money and allowed their city employees, staff, teachers, whatnot, to still be able to live and provide leadership and family activities and things that a city needs. So I'd like to see St. Helena explore that. I don't know what's involved, whether it's possible, but to me, if we could get 1% on every real estate transfer in this town, we could generate some pretty much free money. I don't know who would complain. I wouldn't. If I'm selling my house, I'm probably making money. 1% isn't going to bother me. It's going to significantly help the community and allow us to invest in housing and things that we need to do. So I would like to encourage the council to agendize and maybe further discussion on that. My second revenue suggestion also isn't brand new, and I'll use an analogy of somebody that would come to the city and say, I'd like to offer you $1 million a year, but you have to fill out some forms and jump through some hoops, and you may not get it, but you might. And if that were offered to the city, I would think the council, the staff would be interested, the citizens would expect everyone to be interested. So that analogy is not exactly what's happening, but it's close. My analogy is the topic called annexation of Meadowood. I would like to see the city agendize and focus on that option. I think I have no idea whether it makes sense. I know there's been some controversy on that, but I can say this. I can't think of one reason why in the city of St. Helena it doesn't make sense for us in our community. It may not make sense for Meadowood. It may not make sense for the residents. It may not make sense for Napa. We don't know. And we're never going to know until we get this thing openly aired, discussed, hear opinions in an open, transparent way. Again, I can see an opportunity for the city without building one room, creating one job to add $1 million worth of revenue to the city. And I would like to see that issue furthered, discussed, researched. And if it doesn't work, well, then it doesn't work. But right now it's being ignored and it's not getting its fair hearing. So I would love to see the city further that issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I couldn't resist a Christmas or New Year's wish list. Sandy Erickson, Scott Street. On my wish list is just one immediate item, and that's Grandview. I looked up this last week to see whatever happened with that, and it was during election season, and apparently they wanted some modifications to their permit, and that was scheduled. And then it was continued, and then it was never rescheduled. And then I Googled the city website to see if Grandview ever got a public hearing. Nothing came up on it. That doesn't necessarily mean it didn't, but I've been here at every meeting for the past 2 years, and I didn't see anything. But so it seems that some eyes ought to fall on that project. Especially since the historic wall in front has obviously been caved in for some reason or other and needs repair before it gets worse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak at public forum? Seeing none, we'll close public forum and proceed to reports first by staff. Let me turn to the city manager, Ms. Phillips.
Good evening. I have nothing to report. Thank you.
Ms. Black or Mr. Brown? Ms. Black?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to give you a little update on your annual Statement of Economic Interest, Form 700. And recently, we contracted with South Tech to get our 700 forms automated. So we are just shortly shy of getting that off the ground. It's not due till April 1st. But I'm really excited to move into the technology realm and go paperless. And it's just going to be helpful for the public for transparency reasons, and too, it's going to be real helpful for you as well. So I just want to give you a little update, and I'll get with you real soon, letting you know as soon as it's off and running.
All right.
Thank you.
Ms. Mitz, Finance Director?
I have nothing to report. Thank you.
All right, very well. Public Works Director, Mr. Palmer? No? And our Planning Director? All right, very well. Thank you very much. Members of the council, let me begin with you, Mr. Pitts.
Nothing to report?
Nothing to report.
I do.
All right.
At our December 17th, it's either going to work or not. At our December 17th meeting of the NCTPA, the board was presented with the Napa County Travel Behavior Study, which I'm sure some people read about it in the paper, but this is a draft survey and the results and data analysis report. And this report is a comprehensive collection of data which was that gathered information on the travel behaviors of visitors, employees, residents, and students who make and make non-work trips or work and non-work trips inside Napa County. There was 5 collection methods that were used, which are pretty interesting. There was a vehicle classification counts, winery regression analysis, license plate matching, and in-person winery vehicle intercept and online employer surveys. The one that I thought was most interesting, plus they were able to track our mobile devices and see what the traffic patterns were within the county. So this study will provide the basis for multiple planning efforts for the NCTPA and planning agencies in the county. And this study will actually become the baseline for traffic studies going into the future. And this report is available online at the NCTPA's website, which is nctpa.net. And I did bring a copy of it and the presentation material if anybody wants to see it afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Doring?
You know, I'm too new to report anything. Give me some time.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Yes.
If you'll work with us tonight on the equipment, I want to thank the school district for not only funding but installing the new equipment. They own and operate all of the audiovisual that we utilize to be able to broadcast our meetings. They took it upon themselves to fund that. It was installed over the holiday. They worked very, very hard to get it set up for this meeting. And so we want to thank the school district and the school district staff that's here to help us through this. And if you'll kind of go with us as we have a few glitches, we're very appreciative that they made this investment for us.
All right. Thank you very much. And my only comment would be to compliment the high level of preparation by the city crews and by other city employees at the time of our December 11 event. It was a significant rainstorm. The worst did not happen to us, but the level of preparation, I must say, made me feel very comfortable, and I'm deeply appreciative, and I think everybody in the city is deeply appreciative of the work that was put in by our wonderful employees for that event. All right. We now proceed to presentations. We have no public recognitions, but presentations, and the first would be by the Tree Committee.
Start my timer since we're... Hello. Hi, I'm Casey Stoatsberry. I'm here representing the Tree Committee. The rest of my fellow Tree Committee members are here as well. We're not going to go through the entire presentation today. Y'all have the packet in front of you, and I'm happy to answer questions on any part of it, but if I read it all, we would be here a really long time. So we're just going to jump around and kind of cover sort of the high points and the low points of why we wanted to make changes to the tree ordinance. Some of y'all that have been here for a while will know this has been a long process. It's probably the last 5-6 years it's been trying to be rewritten. I joined the Tree Committee about 2 years ago, and we've been working on it pretty much nonstop ever since. Last August, we sat down with city staff and went over all of the changes. Given all of the recent changes in city staff, it's going to be a little while before they get it to y'all, but we wanted to go ahead and go quickly over some of the changes that y'all are going to see. Okay, one more. Okay, for those of y'all that aren't familiar, the basic role of the Tree Committee is to, one, protect trees here in town, not just individual trees, but the urban forest as a whole. But we also work with property owners. Our goal is not to just make property owners angry by saying yes or no, you can't cut a tree down. In most instances, anytime a permit comes to us, we rarely just say no. And when we do, y'all usually hear about it. I would say in the 2 years that I've been on the committee, we've only denied one permit outright. On all of the rest, we've worked with the property owner and the neighbors to find a solution that works for everyone, in most cases preserving as many trees as possible. Let me skip the next one. There's been some questions about why the ordinance itself is so long. For the most part, if you look at any tree ordinance for any city, standard length is about 10 to 12 pages. This is just because of all the legalese that has to be included. In order to make previous requests from the council happen, we have created a one-page brochure that's going to be available to the public both online and in City Hall that goes through all of the new changes. That way, they don't have to work their way through the entire ordinance. They can take this pamphlet home with them and see what all the new rules and regulations are easily. I'm not going to go through all of the individual changes. City staff will be bringing these to you as they go through the review process. And if you have questions about them, we're happy to answer them, but it's probably best to let city staff have time to go through it and make any changes before we go into specifics. Okay. Just as a note, on the previous slide, you don't have to go back. There's a typo in the first sentence when it says, "Why protect trees on private property?" The next sentence should read that most cities in Napa Valley provide protection for some trees on private property, not public property. Okay, next one. All of the pictures that we're about to go through, these are examples only. I'm not referencing these specific trees as far as any changes or ordinance are concerned. Our goals as a tree committee, primarily the picture on the right, if you look at it, you can see the visual continuity of having the same type of tree planted all down one street. A few years ago, the tree committee revised the master street tree list, which will be included as an amendment to the ordinance. And the goal is to create a street view that's not only continuous, but pretty. I mean, you don't want to put 18 different types of tree on one street. You want to try to pick trees that are going to look good and also benefit the neighborhood itself. The tree on the one tree that's on the corner by itself is an instance of what we call a mature or frilly gone tree. You can see the amount of shade that it provides, not only on the sidewalk and the parking areas, but also if that tree were to be removed, it would drastically change not only the view from the street, but just everyone walking by. There would just be a big gaping hole full of sunlight. Currently, trees that are protected by the ordinance as it reads now are heritage trees, replacement trees, city trees, which are any tree on city property or located within the city's right-of-way, and almost all trees in woodland and watershed zoning. What we're proposing in the new ordinance is that the following species be protected. Most of these are native species, or they're significantly desirable species. These sizes come from, we did a wide scan of ordinances from cities all over the Bay Area, some as far away as Sacramento, but most of them the Bay Area, Napa, and Sonoma counties, and came to an agreement based on the recommendations of the city arborist and what was listed in those ordinances. When it comes to any tree equal or greater than to 24 inches DBH, I brought a little demonstration because I think a lot of people think we mean 24 inches circumference, and we don't. It's diameter, so it's quite large. This is how big of a tree that would be. So it's not 24 inches this way, it's 24 inches across. Next slide. As you're reading through some of the proposed changes, these two pictures will help y'all understand what we're talking about when we're talking about how we measure or what types of measurements and root zones and things like that. So some of the trees that we're talking about protecting on private property, some of them are native species such as particular oaks and things like that. These are all examples of trees that are currently located on private property. They don't necessarily adhere to the regulations, but you can see in each of these instances, if that tree were removed, how much of a change it would make on the visual impact and on the ecosystem of the street itself. Okay, I'm not going to read through all these. Y'all are welcome to ask questions if you have them as we go through, okay? All of the increases in penalties were done mostly at the request or under advisement from city staff. The current arborist or city staff are having trouble enforcing regulations, or the regulations are not spelled out very clearly in the current ordinance. It just sort of says, oh, city staff may do this, and there's no specific instructions for how to calculate tree damage or tree replacement costs. So most of the changes that we implemented there are to make it easier for city staff to collect fines or to impose fines. When it comes to construction, I think we're all pretty aware of the amount of construction that's picking up and happening in town. Most of the changes that we are requesting when it comes to permits for construction have to do with clear cutting of lots. Mostly we're asking for regulations for tree protection if a certain percentage of the tree canopy is being removed, because we've seen a lot of permits lately where they're coming to us with a permit for the street trees in front of the house, but the entire rest of the lot has already been completely raised. And it makes a really big change to a lot of the streets in our neighborhoods. And so we're trying to address the concerns of neighbors that have been brought to us. We're not anti-development, we just want to have a little bit more oversight, particularly of some of the older and larger native trees that are on some of these properties. These are some examples of changes to regulations on how trees are treated during construction. Right now, the regulations are not very enforceable and they're not very clear. So what we've really done is spell them out so that things like this don't happen anymore, or that when they do happen, city staff has the ability to go in and say, take that away, or don't do that, or change it. I'm not going to go through all of the next few slides. It talks about the violations, enforcements, and all of that. And then it's a little hard to see because of the way it is up here, but this is one side, and then the next page is the other side of the one-page brochure that's going to be available for the public. If you take it out of your packet and fold it up, it folds into a 4-fold brochure. It's a little easier to read that way. But that's about it. Should y'all have any questions, or?
So is the idea here that this is an informational packet that'll be put out to the public so we can get some input before we start marking up our law and start putting it into effect?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we sat down with city staff in August, we basically gave them our completed draft. Obviously, all of the different directors need to look at it. Legal has to look at it. And given the changes in staff, it looks like it was going to be a little longer than we thought. So we wanted to bring these to you so you could go ahead and start thinking about it. We've had a couple, before we completed our changes, we had a couple of open public meetings at our meetings, and we invited the public. We had, Jesse wrote some articles in the newspaper and asked people to come and comment, and we did get quite a few comments from the public, both written and from people coming. But we want to make sure that it's an inclusive conversation. It's not just what we think is best. We really welcome all of the public input, so.
And can you comment on some of the other communities within Napa Valley that have already existing laws with regards to protection of trees on private lands?
Yeah, and we can, we have it in all of our research that we've done before y'all get to the final decision. We can provide y'all some information, some comparisons from other cities in the Valley and also in Sonoma and a couple of other base area cities. We don't really have a comprehensive chart made up, but we could provide you all of that information. Basically in Napa, it's primarily street tree and city tree. They don't have a lot of protection for private trees. Yountville, pretty much every tree in the city is protected. They actually just recently made some additional changes to their tree ordinance. I'm not 100% sure on what all the changes are, but it's fairly difficult, especially if you want to do any sort of construction in Yountville, to get any trees taken down. Calistoga, I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry, I'd have to go back and look.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council?
I just want to make sure that this one-page flyer is in draft form, correct?
Yes, everything is in draft form. Nothing's been finalized.
Just for your information, I noticed there's a few inconsistencies in the flyer with some of the at least proposed language with respect to trees. So at some point that needs to be vetted to make sure the language in the flyer is consistent with the ordinances that we have and that we will.
No, absolutely. I would assume that after the ordinance is changed and if it is changed and approved, that we would go back and redo the flyer and have a couple people check over it, make sure it's all accurate.
But wait, I thought the flyer was to be disseminated before so that we can get the public aware of what's happening.
Well, this entire presentation is available online. If anybody wants a copy of it, they're happy to request that from city staff, and then that way, so the whole presentation of itself is kind of informative, but the brochure itself is designed to be printed up after the ordinance is changed, so that anybody who comes into City Hall and says, oh, I need a tree permit, or goes online and says, I need a tree permit, they'll get a copy of the flyer that has all the rules listed out for them.
Got it.
One other change that we did make when we were rewriting the ordinance, we changed a lot of the chapter headings, so that if you're looking at the table of contents, it's much easier to navigate and find what exactly you're looking for. One of the other members just gave, for Calistoga, any tree greater than 12 inches, DBH, so about half this size. Any native oak tree greater than 6 inches, any valley oak seedling and larger, any tree with an active nest of protected bird and heritage trees. Napa, there are a lot of the same varietals that we picked, mostly in the same sizes. Yountville, it's any public or private tree greater than 7 inches DBH, so about that big around. So what we're proposing is pretty modest compared to other cities in the valley. I think we were trying to kind of find that happy point between too much and too little and still save some trees.
Very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I understand there may be some public comment with respect to this issue, if there's any.
Chuck Vondra, Santa Elena. I'll just share an anecdote because of the topic here. I was fortunate enough to have one of the largest trees, oak trees in Napa Valley on my property, close to 400 years old, which if you think about it, it's older than William Shakespeare and our whole country in terms of Western civilization. It's down. It's not there anymore. It's leveled. And I want you to know, the tree committee, I didn't do it for firewood, so I didn't do it. But I have to say, the city was fantastic. We had a huge crash during the rainstorm. Major limb came down. Within 15 minutes, Jake was out from Pacific Tree Care. He'd already contacted the city. They had permits. There was a huge fissure coming down the middle of the tree. 2 major limbs were threatening 2 houses. Mine and my neighbors could have caused extensive damage. He had 2 crews out there within an hour. They worked Friday, they worked Saturday. They had a 150-foot crane out there all weekend. I learned none of this is going to be covered by insurance, by the way. That's kind of a sad thing. But the tree's gone. I did find a horse tie that probably was used by Robert Louis Stevenson, so I may bring it down and offer it to the museum. So I mention it only because the tree committee's here. I didn't do it. I hated to see the tree go. Pacific Tree Care is unbelievable. They were truly more concerned about us, the tree, didn't care about, they're going to get paid, but that was not their issue. They really hated to see that tree go, and so did we all. It changes the entire character of the neighborhood. I can't even open my door now without going like that. So I'd love to get a new tree in there. If the city's handing out trees, I could use a 48-inch Valley Oak if you have any extras, because it's horrible. This was a beautiful, beautiful tree. Thank you.
Yeah, Sandy Erickson, Scott Street. Casey's excellent report was primarily about the aesthetic side of trees and protecting them. I'd like to bring up the climate protection side and introduce the idea of the importance of something called, and I don't know if this is the official word, it's just my word, the common canopy. In the future, and the future is now about 10 years away, 2030 or a little less, climate change will cause the tipping point for more good days than bad days to come sooner. And trees and the amount of canopy in a valley town with a lot of asphalt that is going to be a heat island into itself is going to be critical, not only for the economic prosperity of the town, because either, there'll be more issues having to do with heat and paying for power and all of that kind of thing. And when they may change the general plan, the part about trees that were, I think, south-facing or something, was eliminated from the general plan. So I request that that be considered back in the general plan, that the idea of a common canopy is going to be economically critical to any small town in a valley situation in 10 to 15 years. It can't not be. Also, if you're familiar with New York, Fishkill, New York, their wastewater sewer system, and also I believe the one in Austin, but I'm not sure. I know it's in Texas somewhere, could be Houston. They actually planted thousands and thousands of trees as a specific tactic to avoid having the cost of increasing their wastewater plant, because the trees drank up stormwater, literally. It was quite amazing. And I'd be happy to get that research if anybody needs proof of that. But there's a lot more things that trees can do for a town like ours that don't have to do with just appearances, as critical as that is also. So I hope that the council considers the concept of maintaining a common canopy and increasing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further public comment on the tree issue? Seeing none, we'll go to the next presentation, which is by Caltrans. It deals with the Highway 29 channelization tree removal.
Oh, good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, and citizens. Thank you for having us tonight. My name is Vince Chakal. I'm the Caltrans Public Information Officer here in Napa County. I'm joined tonight by our project manager, Kelly Hirschberg, and from our project team, Peter Battiau. We're here to talk to you tonight about the Highway 12 St. Helena channelization project here on Highway 29. And I like, first of all, I think Kelly didn't know I was going to say this, but first of all, I'd like to say that actually I'm from Berkeley, and we love trees in Berkeley. I think as a project team here in my day job at Caltrans, we talk about projects to improve transportation. And sometimes that does involve removal of some trees. And I think what we're going to talk to you about tonight is that we're very sensitive about the trees that have to be removed because a part of this project, any trees that are removed, that we look at it very closely, and this is after years of planning and approvals. So I think what's going to happen is Kelly and Peter are going to do kind of a brief overview of the project, and then after that, we'd be glad to answer any questions you may have. And we do have a little handout we can share with everyone, and we also have a webpage up too, so we'll get that information to you.
Kelly Hirschberg, project manager with Caltrans. So in a way, this is kind of some of them are repeated presentations. So back in September, we were here to provide kind of the overview of the project presentation. So what we like to actually cover is, actually, obviously project location, description, and sort of the need and purpose, and we'll also have a project plans. The project plans that we'll deal with would focus more this time on emphasis on the widening and kind of in relationship with the trees and some of the trees that we need to remove in order for us to proceed with construction. So the last two is what Vince mentioned earlier, is a communication plan. We have our website up in that will be accessible for everybody to look. And the lastly is a project schedule. So this project itself is 3 miles long. It goes from Mee Lanes to the Charter Oaks. So within the 3 miles, I would say about 1/3 is within the city of St. Helena. The remaining 2/3 is actually in the county of Napa itself. So what we intend to do is actually focus our presentation more toward what's in the city limit. So real quickly, the project was funded 100% from State Highway Protection and Preservation Funds. And it is estimated to be, including the support, capital, and the construction, we're looking at about tune of $35 million as far as a 3 mile stretch of improvements in the stretch. So what we intend to do is as you travel south of the Mee Lane, there's a 2-way left turn pockets where you're allowed to stay in there and able to make a left turn to the driveways or the side street. So that will be continuous from the Mee Lane through the downtown St. Helena all the way up to Charter Oaks. So basically what has been identified is that there are some operation needs as well as some safety concern for people to not wait to turn left. So this project itself will also able to accommodate and address the issue. And we've been also working very closely with the Napa Valley Wine Train because on the southbound side or the west side, we have all the business development, and on the northbound side or east side is where the train tracks are. So the basically train also has an operating right of way, and then they have their requirement with their own the PUC, and we didn't want to impact the business. So our alignment that we chose and the widening that that we picked, it's actually minimize impact to business as well as the allow Napa Valley Wine Train to stay in business with their operating space. So I already talked about this. So we are going to widen the pavement. We're going to repair the pavement. We'll improve the drainage. And actually at the Whitehall Lane, which is kind of the more southern limit, right now there's a skewness of the train track. This is where the wine train crosses from the west to the east, right? So the skewness will be completely alleviated, because basically what we'll do is we'll call it kind of almost like a bypass. So it would allow the bike to cross it perpendicular. So instead of having a bike lane right adjacent to the travel lane, it would be kind of going around and about. So you would actually cross it perpendicular. And what we plan to do is we'll propose one in either direction of it. So that sort of is the project, kind of the big picture. And I think what we intend to do is kind of give you the typical cross sections and each sheet as to what we are doing.
There's one more benefit. Hello, by the way, my name is Piero Batio. I'm the PE or the design engineer on this project. I want to add one more benefit from this project, which is the shoulders. Currently, we have average 2-foot shoulders. It goes from 4 foot to 0. When we're done with this project, we'll have minimum 4 foot to 8 foot shoulder. So we'll have a continuous class 3 bike route from Mee Lane to Charter Oak in both directions. Again, the basic, most important feature is the left turn, two-way left turn lane. That will help with the traffic congestion and also with a lot of accidents a lot. As you're going to, again, it was said by Roosevelt, I believe, that a nation that loses its trees will lose itself ultimately. I believe in that. And with that in mind, let me explain to you why which tree had to go with great sadness. The other way. It's hard to, I need the pictures. It's hard to see with this one. Okay. Again, looking at this picture here, the choice of which side to widen was very obvious. On the west side, we have wineries, we have businesses. It'll be not practical to ask for right away from them. On the east side, which is, where's my pointer? Oh, you can't see it. But on the east side is where the railroad tracks are. There's not many businesses on that side. It's mainly one huge Napa Valley Wine Train parcel. So it was obviously very common to go on that side. We widen on the west side. The east side. I can't see the trees, but I believe wherever you see a red circle, that tree would need to be gone. There's none on this side, yeah. I should have brought my glasses. I do apologize. Oh, I need a better one, though. Yeah. Now on this side here again, on the west side you have the businesses, not a good side to be widening. On the east side we have nothing but that red dashed area. That's where we're widening. You can't see it on the screen, but you can see it on the screen. That dashed red marking, that's the side we're widening. That's the Napa Valley Wine Train side. Not many businesses on that side, so we had to go that way. I see 2 trees. One, I'm sorry about this. I can't point any of these, but there's 2 trees and that drawing to be gone. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can't point. There you go. And if you can closer look at that picture, we have animated the pavement widening and see how close it gets to that tree. So unfortunately, that tree would have to be removed. But it's not just removed and the story ends. It'll be replaced with the legal ratio for that type of tree.
What we wanted to show you here is basically we took a snapshot.
Yeah.
Can you come to the microphone, please?
So just to help Peter, so basically what we did was when you see the what we call a plan view, that's the aerial picture of what we are from the aerial view. So basically what Peter indicated is that the red slash is where we're widening. So what we did was that we took a snapshot of cross-section from the street view as to what you see. So that is actually the cross-section if you were to drive northbound. That's what you'll see. And then what we are doing is, as you see, that's what the widening would occur within the stretch. So as you could tell, the roadway prism for the widening goes into the tree itself. So that's why we are forced to remove that tree. And then this is the other location where we have the 15-inch Coast Live Oak. And the next one, you'll be able to see the widening portion. Does it kind of help you what's happening there? Yeah. So because of that, we had to remove that tree there. So we just wanted to show you our engineering, widening, and then the existing cross street view, and superimpose with our widening, and then with the tree location.
Can I just ask you one question?
Yes, ma'am.
The inches given the diameter or the circumference?
The diameter, like the tree, yeah, the diameter of the tree. The next slide, same situation. This is the engineering drawing. It's hard to see, but you see the red circles. Those are the trees to be removed. Next slide is an aerial of that layout. If it can move, yeah, there you go. And again, we have, I believe, 1 or 2 trees. There's one on this side, again, next to the red dashed widening that would have to go. And this existing condition, that's when you widen the pavement, as you can see, is hitting the trunk. So unfortunately, we have to take it down. There's another one. No, on this side, that's all we have. Yeah, that's the next tree. Again, this is the existing condition, and this would be, sorry, there you go. With the widening, as you can see, hitting the trunk. That's why that tree had to go. Right next to it, there's another one. Or is that all? I believe that's all. Yeah, that's all. And this end of the project is Charter Oak. We have 3 trees of heaven, marked in red. And again, there we go. As we go downtown, the widening becomes less and less. Rather, it becomes tight. We couldn't widen to the west. All those businesses, all those sycamore trees, untouchable. So we had to go to the Napa Valley Wine Train side. That's the trees of heaven. There's 3 of them, right in the middle of the pavement. And that's the end of the project there. One more click, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, the 3 trees of heaven. Yeah, there you go.
So so it's kind of a little bit of an overview of the project, and then obviously, I mean, we're going to communicate a little bit more about the project. So we actually if we had some flyers and information that we handed out to the council. Unfortunately, I don't have enough copies for everybody here, but we do have a web page that's already up on the Caltrans webpage site. So if you need it, come see me. I also have some business cards. So if you have a question with Caltrans and you want to contact someone on the project team, come see me. And I'll answer your question in just a moment, ma'am. And we actually, what our communication plan is, once we get a little bit closer to construction, which is coming up here pretty quick, and Kelly's going to talk about that a little bit more. We actually have different ways that we get information out. So obviously we send out a news release. We share that with a local paper. We get that out and share that with the community. And then we also we're on Twitter these days. If anyone tweets, anybody tweet? And we're also on our blog, and we also have our webpage. So our webpage actually contains some of the information contained that we presented here tonight, has some maps, and it also is going to be where we post a lot of our traffic advisories as well. Is there one more slide? Is it for? Right click. Yeah, and then we also, being the public information officer, I also share this information with local emergency responders and with a lot of other Caltrans maintenance involved in as well. Okay, should I go back? All right, and then we also are working on a flyer that actually will get out through the mail once we get this. We have a little bit more information on the dates and where you can find all this. So what we've been doing is we've actually been going direct mail. So the state is actually working with the Postal Service. So we actually print up flyers and we send them through U.S. Postal Service. So that'll get to you as well, and we'll be able to share a lot of that information with you and get you to the web pages as well. Okay, and then I'm going to hand it off to Peter and Kelly with a little more information on the details of the project schedule.
So this this slide talks about the project schedule, basically what we've been doing up to today and where we're going from here. So we completed our design. Basically what that means, we have I'm sorry, Vince, actually she did have a question. So should we take your question at the end, or do you want to do it now?
Why don't you complete your presentation?
Yeah,
and then I'll give
do that. Yeah, I just wanted to
audience
recognize your
opportunity.
question. Yeah. So basically, at June of 2014, we were able to accomplish what we call is RTL ready to list. So those are when we have all the property rights, we have all the environmental clearance and the permits and the design package that we could go out to construction with. And along with that, in the August of 2014, we received the funding allocation from CTC, that's California Transportation Commission, that gives us the funds to move forward so that we could advertise the project. So we've been working on the bidding package. So the project is actually out for advertisement. So we expect to actually have a bid open January 28th. That's when all the contractors comes in and then puts the bid, and we open the bid and then award it to the lowest responsible bidder. Being said that it's end of January, it does take us another a month to award the contract. Now, at the same token, we have a Migratory Bird Act that we need to actually comply by. So basically what that is, by February 14th of each year, you are allowed to cut trees without actually a bird monitoring or seeing the nesting. So anytime after that, if you found a bird, you have to wait until it fledged from its nest. So what that is, it does a huge impact to our construction schedule. And then basically all the contractor, when they bid for the contract, they have a daily TRO, it's a time-related overhead. So when we hit that, it's like every day you have to pay contractor regardless where he works or not. So what we do for almost all the project is that we do discourage bird nesting. So basically remove the tree prior to the February 14th. So the recognizing the critical schedule, and we also need to comply to stay within our funding allocation. So we'll have an advanced tree contractor. They're out from Berkeley. So he will be coming out here. I think what we are hoping that it will be sometime, maybe even this week, but I'm thinking that either next week or week after, to remove 7 trees within the city limits of St. Helena. And that's that. And then what we'll do is our main contractor will probably start sometime in May, because our utility relocation is currently ongoing. So basically there's a piece of AT&T. So I'm sure you already have gone through the PG&E with their undergrounding work, right? So what they have done is all the aerial facility, the power and the AT&T, that has the electricity has been underground. What's left right now is actually the AT&T cables. Now that's currently being spliced, and what we are anticipating is that to be completed by April. So immediately after that is PG&E. There's actually 2 main trunk in the PG&E here. There's a transmission line and distribution line throughout the State Route 29. So distribution line is already underground, but transmission line is what needs to be happen. So in conjunction with our contractor, because there will be some work done to the maybe 1/3 south, and then the PG&E contractor will be doing a directional board for their transmission line. So I would think that spring or May of this year, there will be a probably major bulk of construction will start. So that's another reason that we like to come here and talk to you about this project, because it has quite of impact with the city of St. Helena and what we are aim to do, and I hope they were successful, is to work with you to kind of inform you as to what we are doing with the construction and schedule, and then in coordination with any activity and business that we need to work with. So that kind of completes our presentation, and I guess we could take the questions now. Yeah.
Well, let me see whether any member of the council has any question for you.
I have some questions.
All right.
I'd like to ask.
Go ahead.
That's okay.
That's-
So I've been asking for a map showing which trees are being removed. I think I asked sometime in maybe third or fourth quarter last year. And I'm a little surprised that we're just getting it now. We're being told that bids are coming in a couple of weeks and trees will be cut down, and that's that.
Next week or the week after.
And so I want to raise a couple of questions. I also want to point out that this presentation, I think you showed the trees that are being cut down from the city limits north, but nothing from Me Lane up to Shacks Lane, correct?
Correct, because again, this is a city meeting, not a county meeting. We went through this with the county earlier.
Okay.
And that's where the focus on.
And the county had no problem with some of the major oaks that are being cut down along 29?
Again, this project is in phases.
Okay.
At every phase of design, we send plans to everybody, the outside agencies, the county, the city, and everyone has had their blessing ever since. With the new mayor and with the new council members, we thought it was best to also introduce the project again out of courtesy. But
Can I add something?
yes, go ahead.
So basically, this project, it's been many years in making, actually. So we've been working on since probably 2007 or even prior to it. So this is, I'm not sure if you remember John Pont from the NCTPA. I'm sure some of you may remember his name. So he actually had to buy, every other month, we had a meeting with all the utility companies, city, and then back then it wasn't Steve, but it was somebody else at that time. And then County of Napa and also NCTPA, we had a meeting every other month on this project. So basically what we have been doing is we've been working with them or all of us together to have the coordination, and at the same time the project plans that we show you here has been shared numerous times with the local jurisdiction, including the utility companies.
Yeah, well, and I was here when you came with the last presentation. I think it was the third quarter. I've been thinking
It was September. It was September.
So that'd be end of third quarter. So I've been thinking about this since then, and I did specifically ask for which trees are coming down, and I think I got that on January 1st. But let me make a point, and then we can, I'll let it go. But obviously trees are important to us, and what I'm struggling with is there are stretches of this road where we're putting this left turn lane in, or I'm sorry, center turn lane, which I think, there's merits to that, right? But everything has to be balanced. But there are stretches, long stretches, where there's no turn right or left, but yet we're putting in this lane so that you can turn right or left to nowhere at the expense of cutting some very significant oaks down. And that's where I see maybe there needs to be some better balancing. Maybe it's the ship has sailed, but I'm asking these questions because I don't know that this is the optimal project for maybe some of our community here.
Okay, let me answer that. The number of trees and which trees had to go was been decided and shown to everybody since the last 10 years. Everybody, meaning the county, the board members previously,
Why couldn't
We've
you
never
show me in the
voted
last
on
meeting?
it or anything like that.
because obviously no one gave you the set of plans from your own city. I'm not sure if Deborah White shared this information with the other people, but we shared this information with everyone meaning the county members, the board members of City of St. Helena. I'm surprised that it's news to you, and I apologize. It
No,
should
but I
never
asked,
been.
I asked you specifically in the last meeting, can I get a map that shows the location of the trees that are going to be removed in St. Helena?
And no one gave you, not from me, but the county or the city had no plan about project at all. I'm off okay. Yeah. I'm surprised and I'm kind of shocked that no one shared information with you, besides me, that is.
Yeah.
And I apologize for that, but
Can
the
you
number,
talk about the rationale of
the
having
same,
a turn lane when there's nowhere to turn?
yeah, I'll get to that, but the same tree shown now to be removed was shown earlier in the other presentation. Yeah. And this is the minimum, this is the least impact, this is the optimum design we can come up with, balancing the right-of-way take, balancing the business impact, balancing the vineyard impact. It's the least impact that we can come up with.
So I think
As far as the middle turn lane, it would make traffic-wise and operational-wise, you don't want to have 3 lanes and 2 lanes and 3 lanes and 2 lanes. It makes more sense and more safety if you keep the middle lane ongoing. That's why we had to, for all the money being spent, you want to optimize your dollars and keep a continuous middle lane.
Well,
You
what
don't know
about
what the future will bring. New houses might come up on the right or the left. A lot of these wineries, they have new entrances and exits in the future to be built. In anticipation of that, we keep the lane continuous. Yes, ma'am.
So basically your question is, it appears there's no driveway and why we are widening the middle, right?
Yeah.
So basically we do have a what we call a highway design manual. So you design a project based on the type of facility, conventional highway, freeway, is it urban and rural? And then so that determines what is the sufficient radius and sight distance that you need to design it for. So basically you just can't really do this. When you actually pick alignment and you have actually expectation of the driver as to what needs to be drive, so you do have to provide the minimum design criteria. So just because within the 100 feet you have a no driveway, you really cannot just bow out in and out as far as alignment goes, because we're also dictated to follow our guideline for the minimum design speed and sight distance that driver is expected to do. So even though it appears as that there's no driveway in the middle of within this 100 feet, however, we need to design it for the certain radius and sight distance that allows that to happen. So you can't really stop and do this.
But could you make the shoulder narrower in the spaces where the tree is? Because on a few of these, it looks like the trees are located in a place where there's no place to turn right or left, and it looks like the asphalt, I mean, it's very hard to tell, but it looks like the asphalt comes right up to the edge of the tree. So if you made the shoulder just a couple of feet narrower, just right where the tree is, you could save the tree. My other question is there's a section in town where the 3 trees of heaven are going to be removed. This already has a center lane. So I'm just wondering why it already has a center lane there.
That is
so
correct,
it just
ma'am.
seems like those 3 trees could be saved.
They
Please
could have
don't
been
get me wrong,
saved.
I appreciate all of your hard work. I'm
No,
just
no.
trying to figure out how can we.
I understand that. I'm here. That's why we're here to explain that. The first question, in the case where the shoulder can be narrowed, we have narrowed the shoulder. The minimum is 4 feet, and by doing that, we have saved some trees. The standard said you got to have 8 foot. If we had applied 8 foot, more trees would be removed. We did a design exception. We had to go to the feds and get approval to reduce the shoulder to 4. We can't go less than 4. We can't have the project with less than 4. The federal laws require you minimum 4 foot. If you can't have 4 foot, you got to explain why you can't have 8 foot. I'm sorry. So we have done what you just mentioned, Miss. We do look at each location, try to minimize. If I can live with 4 foot, I'll go to 4 foot. We're not happy cutting down trees. In the case of trees of heaven, yes, you have a middle lane, but you don't have shoulders. You have 2 foot and 2 foot. With the current proposal, you'll have 4 foot southbound, 8 foot northbound. If a car gets stuck, it has a place to pull over on the 8 foot northbound lane. It's not, so that's what you have there.
So maybe these pictures don't depict reality.
Well, you can't, if you can't measure, I mean, if you want to measure the roadway at every interval, you look at the design layouts, not the pictures.
So let's talk about the replacement trees.
Yeah, the replacement trees.
Are they going to be sited in a similar location, and what type of trees?
Okay, unfortunately, we don't have enough room within the city limits or the project limits, but within the local area, we're replacing these trees. By Yountville, we're going to plant a small forest of trees and replace them for these trees.
Wait, I guess I missed. Could
Yeah.
you repeat what you said at first?
Yeah,
You're not going to replace trees in the city of St. Helena?
There's some, very few within the city itself.
Why wouldn't you replace 7 since you're taking
Because
7?
we don't have room. If you put us the room, we'll put it there. But we have room elsewhere close by, just north of St. Helena and south of St. Helena. Well, we don't have right of way to plant it within the city or the project limits.
So
If the city were to donate some land, yeah, we'll plant it there. But within the state right of way, within the project limits, there's no room to plant it. So we're going to replace them south of Yountville and north of St. Helena.
are all of these
How far north of St. Helena?
How far north?
I think it's it's near the state park, just the south of the is it Gristmill?
Faith Park.
Yeah, yeah. So the basically another thing that I wanted to add to Peter is that basically another reason that why we cannot put it back exactly where it is that what we also call a horizontal recovery zone. So sometimes a tree itself becomes obstruction. So meaning is a driver could hit the tree and then could get into accident. So what we, same token as what we talked about highway design manual, any new planting that you do on a tree, you have to plant it beyond the horizontal recovery zone. So that's basically about 20 feet away from the white fog line. You may have an existing tree. If there's a lot of accident, what you do is you could shield it with a metal beam guardrail. You've probably seen that, right? It kind of looks like it comes in front of it. But any new trees that you're proposing, even though it's at the same location, we're not allowed to plant because it becomes obstruction.
And have you contacted, like, for example, right across the street from where this 40-foot valley oak is, 40-inch valley oak is going to be taken out? Have you contacted the landowners on the other side of the street to see if you could plant a tree over there? Or you just haven't considered anything out of your right-of-way? In other words, the speaker that was a little bit earlier was talking about the canopy in town. And in order to maintain the canopy in town, it would be nice to replace what you're taking out. Even if it's not in your right-of-way, it could be somewhere else in town.
No, that's fine. So basically, there was actually a third location. I guess the previous, the city personnel that we have worked with, there were about, I would say, like 5 locations where the tree wells were. And at that point, we were actually going to give City of St. Helena funds to plant the trees. But I was told that those were spoken for already. So this was about 2 years ago. So if what we could do is the few trees, we could actually certainly get into an agreement with you, and we could we could provide some funds, and then it would be your discretion to plant a tree within the pretty much in the same area of a St. Helena. That we could accommodate. That was a plan as a third location, but what happened was we were told that those tree wells were already spoken for, so we couldn't move forward with that.
Well, I don't know anything about that, but I guess the bottom line is these trees are in your right-of-way, so they're 100% under your jurisdiction.
Correct, and we have no authority to impose on private owners with planting trees.
And we have no authority in preventing you from cutting them down.
Well, it's not an issue of that, Miss. Believe me, we don't like cutting trees, ma'am.
No, I'm just saying, because I want the public to understand that it isn't a decision that the city made to allow you to cut these down. You made the decision on your own because they're in your right-of-way.
The decision was made on our own, but we had the blessing of everybody previously from this room, from the county, and from the tree. Even the tree committee had approval way back when we were processing this project.
Well, I've been here
we didn't
since
just railroad it throughout, everybody's.
But these trees are on land that is owned by whom?
The state.
Caltrans. They're in Caltrans right away. So I just want the town to know that this is not something that the city council approved. This is Caltrans land, so they get to decide.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but the city council did approve our plans.
We did?
Well, not you, but the previous.
What?
Years ago, we did. This is a very long time in the making, and
so it's been 7 years.
These plans have been set for some time, and we're now just about entering the construction phase. And this is really just an update, so that as these trees are removed, we are aware that they are going to be removed pursuant to what has been long approved.
I just think
this project's been going on since the 80s, so this is the next phase from Yountville.
On up.
Yeah, no, and I agree with the safety and all of that. I just think that St. Helena should directly benefit from new trees being planted to replace the trees that are being taken out instead of Bothay or Yountville's forest. We don't see a benefit so much.
I agree with you, Miss, and that's why I was saying if you can suggest some locations within the city, like Kelly was saying, we can work some kind of a deal.
Mr. Vondra would like a tree down there. He just lost his. I'll take a tree.
No, basically you can't really get into agreement with the individual. So what we did was we proposed the city of St. Helena that there was a tree well that was available. So, and at the time they said, I heard it was spoken for, so I don't know. You know what?
Well, let's talk about this a little further, maybe.
the Public Works Director and I are happy. We know nothing. We're trying to do eye contact here. We know nothing about this. And so we're happy to work with the Caltrans staff to see if there's opportunities to plant the replacement trees in the city of St. Helena. So
Yeah, why don't we try to do that?
Okay,
Be happy
great.
to do that.
Okay.
All right, terrific.
Yeah, we can do that because the tree replacement is a separate project from this, not directly involved with this, but
Right,
as a result of this. So while the construction is going on, that can still continue as a
I
separate
think it would
project.
make people feel better if they knew that
Oh, yes,
the trees that were being taken out in St. Helena were going to be replaced in St. Helena.
That would be optimal, of course, yeah. Ma'am, you had a question back there.
Yes,
Yes.
please do.
Good evening. I'm Faith Echtermeyer, and
I'm opening the public hearing with respect to this issue.
Pardon me?
I said technically I'm opening the public
Oh,
hearing with
okay.
respect to this issue.
Terrific, because this is the first that I know about this. I realize this project has been in the works for, say, more than 7 years, but I feel there's still time to prevent some big mistakes. And I'm really concerned about the heritage oak trees that are 200 to 300 years old between Zinfandel and where the train crosses over the highway by Whitehall. And I'd like you to tell me what the future holds for those trees. And one more thing, that I realize the tree tunnel in front of Behringer doesn't fit any of these regulations, Caltrans regulations, and yet we have protected those trees, and I want those oak trees down in front of Deldado and Whitehall to be saved, because at one time the whole valley was covered with those trees, and now we have almost none left.
First, thank you for your concern, Miss. Let me just say that I need to repeat myself again. I'm sorry, but we did not arbitrarily pick these trees to go down. We had careful consideration which one and why, and that's how we came here to show you why each tree had to go. As for the trees outside the city limits, the same thing. We can go through the same slide and show you why they had to go. But it was the minimum amount of trees we had to cut down. On the northbound from Zinfandel to Stice, there's a whole row of trees between the PG&E poles with the wires going through the trees. They had many years of trimming, and choosing between those trees or the ones on the left that were healthy and beautiful, we chose to cut the ones that were not healthy and beautiful, and that's the ones that are going down. So like I said, it's not arbitrarily chosen which one goes down. It was after careful balancing of what's best for the community, what's best for traffic safety, what's best for the wineries, and combining all that, ultimately, unfortunately, some trees had to be removed, but they'll be replaced, and the replacement part can be worked on.
So between Whitehall and Zinfandel, are you saying that the trees on the west side of the road stay and the trees that are on the right side of the road is where there may be some removal?
For the most part, there are some on the west side that will go down, but very, very few. I would say maybe 4 only.
4, right?
Yeah. But they're shown on the plans. And if anybody's interested, we can mail these.
No, that's because they're outside city limits.
Outside city limit, yeah.
Mr. Vondra?
Go ahead, sir.
Chuck Vondra, sorry to keep interrupting, but I'm dead serious. I will volunteer my property if they're looking for a home for a Valley Oak. I've got a big tree well. And again, in all seriousness, I'm offering a place to plant that tree. That tree is a loss to the whole city, not just my neighbor and I who co-own the tree, but I've got space for it. I'm getting the stump ground down. I'm hereby on record offering my lot for a home for a replacement tree.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you very much.
On that note, I was hoping maybe the contractor who cut down the big tree that he had can move the one by Dowdell and plant it on his property.
Can
It'd
they
be beautiful.
can a 40-inch Valley Oak be transplanted? I didn't think
We
so.
can't do it, but maybe someone can.
I don't
But
think
it's a loss.
I don't think it will survive.
I think it's been done, but it's very expensive.
Yeah, and also the
A very large
survivability is very
figure.
low. The chance of surviving, it
Is
just
very
gets
low.
into shock and doesn't. No guarantee it'll survive.
Yeah.
Is there any further public comment here? One more, yes?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, but one thing I want to
begin
say.
with stating your
Oh,
name.
sorry, Suzanne Ortega. Am I too close? One thing about the mitigation for trees, the tree committee of St. Helena is a possible resource to help locate trees. My question is, I don't think it's been established what species, what size, what the mitigation offer is from Caltrans. That would be important. I know the arborist has a specific policy on certain trees, but I think it should come maybe to the tree committee and we talk about it to get the details of what Caltrans will mitigate back to the city. I know they have offered to do some mitigation, and this is the first I heard it was going to go up towards the north end of town. The other thing I want to bring up, I think I heard them say the Federal Migratory Bird Treaty Act says it's illegal to remove nests containing eggs or nestlings during a period of, and they're saying February 15th, starting February 15th through September 30th. I've read the Bird Treaty Act, and it states February 1st through September 30th. I don't know if towns can change that date, but I think that should be looked into. If it is, it's impossible to take them down, take the trees down before February date. I think it should be mandatory by the Caltrans to use a biologist to inspect the trees, especially the oaks, for any nesting birds who are starting even now with spring right around the corner. I think that's required by the treaty, and the biologist would have to visually look at the trees prior to cutting the trees down and during the time they're going to cut the trees down. If there are any activities around the nesting that they have to stop, that's in the treaty. So that should be investigated before or figured out. And yes, St. Helena has goals to maintain and increase the tree canopy coverage. It's in the general plan that's coming. It's been in the general plan. The environmental benefits of carbon dioxide absorption, energy production, and other climate controls are benefits to the town. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Just want to say something. The lady is correct. When the tree cutting does start, the state is required to have an arborist on the scene to inspect these trees before they're chopped down. That is true.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
How was the 4 foot, instead of 8, you got approval to make it 4? And I know that was in an effort to save more trees. If it had been 3, would you have to cut down all 7?
If we're allowed to have 2 foot shoulder, I would bring it to 2 foot shoulder to save a tree. But the federal laws say you can have 2 foot shoulder. It's either 4 or more. It's 4.
But as you could see, I think there was also our previous presentation had a tree canopy and the root system. Just because you missed the trunk, it doesn't mean the tree will survive.
Right. No, I'm well aware of that.
So basically, just because you save it underfoot, which I don't think we could really do, doesn't mean the tree will survive because it's pretty extensive a root system, and that's some of the consideration that we took place. So. You know what I mean? Just like maybe foot here, foot there. I don't think it would yield to what you are looking for. That's what I was trying to say, because there's actually a root system and canopy that supports that tree.
Well, it depends on how deep you extract to lay the road base, right?
No, but then Peter, basically what it is the area has to be widened out to, and then what happened was, like we talked about the drainage system. So because of widening, and then we have an agreement with the Napa Valley Wine Train that will contain the runoff within our existing edge of the pavement, we are installing these drainage system with a pipe, meaning as you have the DIs, these drop boxes, and that those need to be collected, and we'll have a pipe between the system. So you would have, in addition to the pavement, you do have actually a drainage system of the network that runs along the 29.
Basically, you have a continuous trench along the edge of pavement that's 4 to 6 foot deep. There's no way you can preserve any tree adjacent to it. Also, one of the reasons why we have been allowed to use 4 foot shoulders was to use the justification that by doing that we save more trees, and that's why we were granted the 4 foot shoulders, because of for saving more trees.
there any further public comment?
Chris Cole, 140 Rose Lane, St. Helena. I have two questions. I'll ask the easy one first. I'm wondering if there's going to be any improvements to the paving between Charter Oak Avenue and the Sulphur Creek Bridge.
The project actually stops about 400 feet north of Charter Oak, just before the bridge. So we don't stop at Charter Oak, but a few hundred feet north of that. I don't know if that's enough.
And then my other comments follow the presentation that Kelly gave on September 23rd. And since then, well, actually, for about a year, I've trying to get specifics on the actual sections of the project with specific dimensions. And I did get the generic project plan cross-section from Kelly in September. And then that was followed with the tree plan, which you now have. But inside of that, there are actual details of the sections with dimensions, which I know Steve has requested from Kelly. I haven't seen them yet. But this goes back to some correspondence I had in September with Diana Meehan at the NVTPA regarding the potential for improvements for bicycle lanes along that stretch of highway between the Sulphur Creek Bridge and Dowdell, and also on the west side from Sulphur Creek Bridge to Grayson. And I've looked at the section plans, and I can't see that there's additional room on the east side between the new highway right-of-way line and the remaining portion of the Napa Valley Wine Train right-of-way for the Vine Trail. And my comments with the NVTPA indicated that I kind of missed the boat since I didn't comment during the 2007 comment period. But I think in 2007, the Vine Trail was not even a concept. And yet Caltrans has deferred to the Vine Trail to make the improvements that will actually bring something to the city. So I'm wondering if they can speak to the what's left and the width that will be available for the Vine Trail with their future improvements. Thank you.
As I mentioned, the project stops before the bridge. However, the existing shoulder from the bridge going northbound, or from the bridge, heading northbound to the bridge from Grayson or Charter Oak, you'll have 4-foot shoulder from Charter Oak to the bridge. After the bridge, we're not doing anything beyond the bridge. But that will be, the existing condition is 4-foot shoulder. When you reach Charter Oak, it'll become 8-foot shoulder. So you have a continuous type 3 bikeway from the bridge all the way to Mee Lane.
Is there any further public comment?
That's 3 bikeway.
All right.
Bike route, sorry, not way, bike route.
Please state your name.
Kelly Carlin, 1410 Adams Street. Can you hear me? Yeah, I just want to, just commenting on the trees, I just want to encourage the city council to look at this as an opportunity. I know we're removing trees, and just want to say to Sharon, the trees of heaven are really, most of us consider them the trees of hell because they're very invasive species. So those we don't mind getting rid of. But I'd like to have the city look at this as an opportunity to improve the entrance of St. Helena. We've got the beautiful tree tunnel on the north. On the south, we've got, our oaks here and there, but if we could do something a little more substantial, I know we can't do it in the right-of-way, and maybe the railroad tracks are also going to be a problem, but outside the right-of-way, maybe we do have some space, private property, to put some additional trees in there, more oaks or whatever, just to improve our entrance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carol Troy, St. Helena. I was just looking at this 40-inch valley oak. And it would be nice if we could have a design exception for that. I realize it's way too late in the game, but having turn lanes to nowhere seems really unnecessary when we have so few of these heritage oaks left. It's like we're building a bridge to nowhere, having these lanes to nowhere and cutting down these huge old trees that have been here for hundreds of years. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anything further from the council?
Through the chair, just one question to our Public Works Director. I assume that there's coordination with any of the work that the city is doing, traffic signals, anything like that, adjacent to the highway, coordination with the plans to start in May. I'm not sure if there's any projects that on that horizon, but I want to make sure that they're coordinated so we're not having to cut pavement and then cut pavement again.
Yes, the only project on Caltrans right away that is in the plans right now is the Grayson traffic signal that the council is well aware of, and we are coordinating with myself and Kelly directly on the installation of that and timing for that project.
Thank you.
One further public comment?
Joe White, St. Helena. So just a quick question for Caltrans people is, the curb width is based on lane width, or is it, and also based on us being classified as urban or rural, correct?
No, it's the highway standards. Any conventional
Hey,
highway.
can you come to the microphone, please?
No, so that's based on the type of highway you have. If it's a freeway or a highway, conventional highway, 2-lane or less, you need a 8-foot minimum shoulder. That's as simple as that.
Okay.
It doesn't matter there's no other criteria. And whenever you do a rehab on a project, you must bring up to standard. That's the catch.
So not based on width, 10-foot width, different shoulder width. This is the federal.
The federal guidelines are when you do a rehab on any section of highway, you must bring the lanes to 12 foot and the shoulders to 8 foot. And if you can't, you must explain why.
Okay.
In this case, we had, there are exceptions, and they granted our exception because we said, hey, if you don't give us 4 foot, we'll be cutting more trees. They said, okay, no, you have your 4 foot. That's how we got the 4 foot.
Okay. So if we actually lessen the width of the lane as well from 12 feet down and the shoulder.
There's a minimum how down you can go. There's a minimum how much you can reduce the lane. You can have less than 11. So you can only save yourself 2 foot there.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
World of rules, no question about it. All right, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Can we have Vince, do you want to close it up?
Yes, well, I'd just like to thank everyone for your consideration tonight. And also, I have some business cards I'm going to leave with your city clerk, Cindy Black. If you have any other questions about the project, any general questions, I'd be glad to answer those. And if you have any other questions for the project altogether, then I can get them to the appropriate staff and get a response for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we next proceed to the consent calendar. And these are items 18 through.
I'd like to pull number 12, but I would move approval of 10.
Let me say what they are first.
Oh. All right.
We have items on the consent calendar. Item 10 is consideration of a resolution reducing the membership of the Sustainability Committee from 7 members and 2 alternates to 5 members and 2 alternates. Item 11 is consideration of a resolution approving the Chamber of Commerce request to display flags on Main Street for Premier Napa Valley event. 12 is consideration of a resolution amending the library hours of operation. 13 is consideration of a resolution approving an amendment with Marin IT to provide information technology services for an amount not exceeding $60,000. And item 14 is consideration of a resolution authorizing the city manager to sign a lease termination agreement with Nextel of California. So first, does anybody on the city council wish to pull any of these items?
I wish to pull 12.
Okay.
And I'd like to talk about 12 a little bit too, so I'm glad you're pulling that one. Thank you.
All right, does any member of the public wish to pull any of these items? All right, then the chair would entertain a motion to approve items 10, 11, 13, and 14.
Move approval.
Second.
Could you repeat the?
All right, 10, 11, 13,
I move
and
approval.
14.
Paul Doring.
Councilmember Doring,
Yes.
Mayor, Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Councilmember Kroll,
Yes.
Pitts,
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith.
Yes. That takes us back to item 12, and the lead staff is Jennifer Baker.
Well, first, can I say why I pulled it?
Certainly.
So I pulled this item for a couple reasons, but one, I want to thank. One thing I'm very happy about in this is I've been talking about this for years, having the library open on some of the Mondays that are school holidays. I actually really only meant the winter Mondays, Martin Luther King Day and President's Day, but I see they included all of them. But anyway, I'm thankful for that. But the reason that I pulled it is I was just a little bit concerned about the results of the survey. I guess it just bothers me to not have the library open at all before 2:00 on the weekend day. And so when I was sent the survey, what my choice would have been wasn't an option, and I wonder if that's the same for other people too, because rather than have it, my choice would have been 12 to 6 both days instead of 10 to 6 and 2 to 6 or whatever. But that wasn't an option in the survey. And I'm also just a little concerned because a lot of the people that use the library on the weekends are children. And I don't know that they were sent surveys. Both my kids have library cards, but they didn't get surveys. They probably don't have their email addresses. So it's nobody's fault or anything, but I'm just concerned that there aren't any morning weekend library hours, or even and the days that the count was taken was in October, which concerns me a little bit just because a very high percentage of the children in this town play soccer, which happens in October, so they wouldn't be coming in the morning anyway in October or in the fall, but maybe in other times of the year. I don't know. I could be wrong, but it just seems like before making this change, we could maybe do a count on a different month or 2 or 3 months to see if it stayed the same. So those are my issues with this.
Before you comment, I just wanted to add my 2 or 3 cents to it. I have a different issue. I'm really concerned that, and I don't know, you may, hopefully will be able to provide the answer. I want to make sure that our employees are on board with this, the library employees. I don't want to create a situation where there's animosity or a feeling of unequal treatment that some employees have to work on those holidays. I'm talking about the holiday days specifically. I want to make sure that that's fully vetted. We don't want to create a situation where there's a morale issue because certain employees say, why do we have to work on that day and others don't? So I'd like to hear your response on that to make sure that you've heard loud and clear from your employees one way or another. I also think that we want to encourage people to be with their families, employees to be with their families on holidays, and we also want to, and that's very important, and there's certain holidays here, especially Memorial Day, where that is a big event throughout the United States, of course, where we honor our fallen warriors. And in St. Helena, a lot of people go to the cemetery, and I've been more and more involved in that. I'm just really proud to see so many people show up on that day. That day in particular is one where we don't want to diminish that inadvertently. I'm sure that is the farthest thing from your mind, but that concerns me. So the one is, we look at the consumer side, and I have young children too, so I agree totally with you that more days, the better. But then there's the employee and the employee morale side to make sure that we don't misstep and make sure that they're heard loud and clear, because I think that is our obligation to make sure our employees have really high morale. So.
Right, and that's why for me it was more the winter Mondays when not every parent has Martin Luther King Day off, and not every parent has President's Day off. But the summer holidays, I'm not sure if we would see a lot of use on those days, but the summer Mondays, I should say.
If it's all right with you, I'll address Paul's questions first, since it's a little faster. I'm usually at the library every day because we have a cat that has to be fed. So I was there on Christmas Day, and people wanted to come in. So I think we could be open 24/7, and somebody would be there. That said, the with regard to the concern about the employees, it was never our intent to say you have to work this day. It was always going to be on a voluntary basis. That may prove to be a little difficult to find a sufficient number of volunteers. We have to have a minimum of 3 people that will work to be able to open safely. And we could try it for just the winter days and not include Memorial Day and Labor Day. And it's also something that we could do it and track usage and see if it's even warranted. Monday does tend to be a busy day, which I'll go into in the second part of this, but in regards to holidays, it's something that, we could rework.
Yeah, and I can appreciate. I was at the library yesterday, and I got there right after it opened, and there was it was like people had been waiting for the library to open. So I can appreciate the need for extended hours on Monday. I mean, I wish we had enough money to be open 10 to 6 Saturday and Monday.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I thought that the easiest way to address your concerns was maybe just to give you a little more detail on how we did the survey, what other information we used to make the decision, and then we could talk about it and see if you have any further questions. First off, the survey was distributed via email to at least 4,000 people. We sent it through our e-newsletter as well as the city's e-newsletter. There's a fair amount of duplication, I imagine, so some people will have received it twice, but at least 4,000 separate individuals would have received it. We also had paper surveys that were distributed in the library through our hold items and by library staff at both service desks, including the children's desk. And particular efforts were made on Saturdays, of course, since that was the day that we were looking at affecting. It was placed front and center on the library's website for a period of 45 days. During that time, we had about 8,000 hits on the site. We still only had about 461 people took the survey. It was also mentioned in a press release to the Star. And then it's correct, we didn't actively target children, but we did have a number of parents that participated in the survey. We did have it available in the children's room. So that's just in terms of how we got it out. We did consider 12 to 6 on both days. Or at least we talked about it. Unfortunately, that's not an option with the current staffing budget because we couldn't reallocate the staff that we have that are full-time to work a 6-hour day. We would have, and so we would end up not having the salary savings to be able to affect that. We could do that, but it would cost us an annual amount of about $8,000. Prorated for the remainder of this fiscal year would be about $3,000, and we just don't have that. Being open 10 to 6 both days, of course, everybody would love that. We had a number of people that suggested that. And that also just not in the budget right now. We would be needing an increase of $12,500 to make that happen ongoing, and prorated again for the rest of this year would be $5,200. Some of the other things that you were concerned about in terms of October maybe being an unusual month or the door count not being sufficient enough to compare. I went back. We keep a book where we write this down every single day that we're open. And so I went back and looked at the whole year. Our average door count on a Saturday year-round was 478, which is 10% of our total library visits. It's 14% of our total open hours. Our average Monday use is 548, which is 12% of our total library visits during 7% of our open hours. So Napa County Library also reports that Monday is routinely its busiest day. So I think the thing to consider is that everyone would be happy if we were open 24/7. And it's just not an option for us, obviously. Staff's one of our most costly resources, and it's also one of the ones that we have to be careful with because it's our most limited resource. So we're just trying to figure out a way to distribute it in the way that's going to make the most sense to the most people. When we did the survey, we had 15% said that it might or would have a negative effect on their use of the library. There was over 50% that said it might or would have a positive effect, and then a total of 85% when you included the people that said it wouldn't bother them at all one way or the other. So one thing we did not consider, which we could look at, would be the possibility of having Saturday mornings 10 to 2 instead of 2 to 6, because then that would give us a morning time slot on a weekend. Right now, our use patterns don't really reflect that would be all that
Or what
helpful.
about 12 to 4? Because I agree with you that maybe the early morning isn't the busiest time on Saturday.
You know, I think in general, people will find a way to make it work.
6 o'clock on Saturday. I mean, it seems to me I have no idea if this is true or not, but it seems to me that, 4 to 6 on Saturday evening, night, or afternoon, evening is probably less. I don't know. A lot of people do other things on Saturday afternoons, evening, but maybe 12 to 4 would be more. I have no idea.
Which
but
day
it just
gets
seems
more
like,
use in general?
It just seems like there's a lot of people that live here who are in the hospitality industry and they go to work in the afternoon, they work at restaurants, whatever, and they have no opportunity on the weekend now to use the library. So it just seems like a stagger of at least Saturday and Sunday would be, at least as a test, to see.
Yeah.
If it's more workable for people.
Monday is a very busy day per hour. It tends to fluctuate depending on the season and, whether it's dark outside at night, or there's a lot of different factors but if you look at the entire kind of overall arc for the year, Mondays definitely are a busy day.
But what about 5 to 6 on Saturday? Is that busy?
I'd have to look. I did look at one. I just did a snapshot this afternoon of one day, specifically looking at children's items, since that was one of your concerns. We can do how many items were checked out per hour in at different stations, and so I looked up that on the 11th of October we had 499 items that were checked out. 132 of those were children's items, and that was 23 individuals over the course of the entire day. It was about evenly split for as to whether it was before 2 o'clock or after 2 o'clock, but it was not a large number of people. Again, somebody's going to be
not
unhappy.
Everybody goes to the library to check out books.
Yeah, true.
But so the only Monday we extended to earlier. Sunday's the same as it was. It's only Saturday that's really being sacrificed here.
Right.
Yes.
Right? Whereas it used to be 10 to 6, and this would be 2 to 6.
Correct.
And so what's the incremental cost of Saturday staying at 10 to 6 and Sunday remaining at 2 to 6?
If we were to leave, to not affect Monday or to
Not affect Saturday.
If we were to do 10 to 6 on Saturday and Sunday,
No,
Monday.
Just on Saturday. Yeah, but Monday going to 10 to 6 as well. Yeah.
If we were to do 10 to 6 on both days, it would be approximately $12,500 for the year. If it were for this year, it would be about $5,200 for the remainder of the year.
When you say both days, you mean Monday and Saturday,
Correct,
Sunday
10 to
staying at
6.
2 to 6?
Yes,
Just budget
correct.
year.
Just
Okay.
those 2 days. So we basically would be adding 4 hours.
Okay. Well, can we, I mean, maybe we could get more information about Saturday morning usage historically, but move forward with this for now, and we can always revisit whether or not it's worth spending that $12,000 to open from 10 to 6 on Saturday.
Well, that's one of the things that the library board was, one of the reasons why they suggested this as a 6-month trial. It gives us opportunity to test it and to get feedback from the community, continue to gather statistics and fun stuff, but also just get, just people's opinions and responses. And then it is something that we could incorporate in a budget request going into next year if it's something that was warranted by the community.
And do people email you or contact you when they go to the library and it's closed and they're angry or they're upset or they're
Some do.
disappointed? I mean, do they do that? I'm just curious. I don't know. I mean, would you be able to would you be able to know whether people were disappointed that the
Most
library wasn't
often, it's not so much that they're angry, it's that they're disappointed or confused. We have staff in the building on Monday mornings doing clerical stuff, and we tend to try to hide from the front doors because people come up and they see us, and then they think we're open, and then they go away sad. So it's like I said, I'm there on New Year's Day, Christmas Day, and there are people walking up to the door. So it's,
And it would be $3,000 this budget system. This budget system to have it 12 to 6. It's 5,000 to have it 10 to 6, but it would be 3,000 this budget cycle to have it 12 to 6 on Saturday.
Yes.
I guess the big question is, we have like $1 million budget for the library. And we're really restricting the weekends, and some people may have obligations during the week such that they can never use the library. And I'd love to find out, are we impacting a big portion of our community that then really has a real small window on the weekend to use it with over what could maybe be a 1% incremental budget increase to perhaps provide a lot more utility for the entire community. So if we can try to answer that question, that'd be good to know from my perspective.
Well, and we are in the process also of putting together a strategic plan where we're going to be asking all kinds of questions of our community about that sort of thing and other stuff as well. Whether or not we will have that data in time to include it in the budget, I don't know, but it's always something, this is a fairly easy thing to say it would cost this much to.
I'd like to move approval of the item with the exception of the 2 summer Monday holidays. Don't add those to this new framework.
Second.
All right. Is there any further discussion by council? From my position, I'm deferring to the experts here completely. Ms. Black, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Doring?
Yes.
Pitts?
Yes.
Kroll?
Yes.
White?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
I agree with it.
Next item on our agenda, item 15, is consider amendments to the city's zoning ordinance 17.144 with a list of changes, and the lead item is the lead staff is Aaron Heacock. But I guess that's going to be you.
I'm standing in
Okay, very well.
for Aaron today. Yes, Mayor, members of the council. This item, in a nutshell, is an update to the city's affordable housing ordinance. From a background standpoint, the proposed changes are driven largely to address updates, changes in state law. The changes also evolved out of the whole Calderon lawsuit settlement process. And the Planning Commission on November 18th reviewed these proposed changes and recommended that the City Council approve them as proposed. In terms of the changes themselves, the staff report goes into some detail in terms of summarizing the changes. The staff report packet includes a red line strikeout version, which lists all the various changes. From a summary point of view, the bulk of the modifications are to the density bonus section of the city's affordable housing ordinance, and a number of changes, once again, relating to changes in state law concerning allowing senior housing, age-restricted mobile home parks to be eligible for density bonuses. Items such as on-site child care can trigger the need or ability for additional density bonuses. Clarifications such as the developer can accept less than the percentage of the required density bonus. In other words, they don't have to take the maximum. And a number of other changes that are both discussed in the staff report and listed in the red line strikeout document. The other item before the City Council is a policy concerning water sewer service priority for affordable housing projects. Once again, there is some state legislation that essentially this wording is modeled after. As noted in the staff report, there are specific exemptions in the policy to reflect water emergencies such as have at least been threatened in the past. And for instance, if the city doesn't have sufficient water supply, treatment capacity, et cetera, or other reasons, those scenarios triggers exemptions to this priority to affordable housing. With that, then, as a quick overview, staff recommends that the City Council approve the first reading of the ordinance changes and approve the resolution with the water sewer priority policy. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does council have any questions of staff at this point? Let me open the public hearing then. Does anybody wish to speak at public hearing on this matter?
Good evening, Mayor Galbraith and City Council members. I thought in the language of the Calderon suit settlement, there was something in there about second units not being counted as affordable housing units, and I don't see that anywhere. Could someone respond to that?
Yes, to clarify, there have been a series of items going forward to Commission and Council to implement the Calderon settlement, and that was an item that was brought forward previously. So the item currently before Council is in relation to the city's affordable housing ordinance. So I believe the item you're referring to was already addressed in a previous action by Council.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sure.
I believe what the speaker is referring to is the fact that in the settlement agreement itself, the city not only was required to consider and adopt 4 different pieces of legislation, 2 of which are before the council this evening, but in addition, there were a series of other requirements on the city with respect to increasing its financial contributions to the city's Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and tying those contributions to a series of mileposts that were essentially linked to whether the city had approved certain affordable housing developments along the 8-year period between now and the end of the city's housing element period. For purposes of that, under the settlement agreement, you're correct. Second units were excluded from in other words, they were not allowed to be counted for purposes of meeting those mileposts for the financial contributions. This legislation before the City Council this evening doesn't go to that at all. It simply goes to changes in the city's what's known as the city's density bonus ordinance, which is an ordinance that all cities in California are required to have to implement a requirement under state law, giving developers of affordable housing certain advantages as they process their projects.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't lost.
It wasn't.
Okay, very good. Is there any other public comment? All right, seeing none, the chair would entertain a motion with respect to item 15.
Move to approve staff recommendation on this ordinance.
With clarification, that
this is the
motion would
first
also
reading.
include not only the ordinance, but also the resolution adopting the water priority guidelines.
Okay. To include the water guidelines.
And a waiver of the reading?
Is it a waiver or this is the first?
Yes, the staff recommendation is also to waive the first reading.
Okay.
Not waive the reading, but waive full
Right.
reading of the ordinance.
Yes.
Correct. Is there a second? So the motion has been made by Councilmember White and seconded by Councilmember Kroll. Is there can you call the roll, please?
Certainly will. Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Councilmember Kroll? Yes. Doring?
Yes.
Pitts?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes. And that then takes us to item 16. And Mr. Carniglia, once again.
Yes, Mayor, members of the council. This item's related in a number of ways. Its genesis really comes out of the city's housing element update process and are not directly related to the Calderon issue, although they obviously have some indirect relationship. The Planning Commission on December 16th recommended that the City Council approve the ordinance changes under this agenda item. Once again, I'm not going to go through everything in the staff report, but just to summarize, the changes are extensive if you look at simply the number of them, and they revolve around a number of things which I'll just touch on. One is simply adding new definitions for a variety of types of housing, and those are supportive housing, transitional housing, agricultural housing, single-family occupancy, and then emergency housing. Then with those definitions, there are a whole number of modifications to the city's zoning ordinance, and essentially under the on the use types allowed. And in a nutshell, without going into all the nuances, they make the majority of those new housing types permitted uses in the city's residential zones. In terms of emergency shelters, those become permitted uses in a number of non-residential zones, namely service, commercial, business and professional office, and industrial zones. And the other key change is to create a process in relation to reasonable accommodation for people with disabilities, and the ordinance change outlines how that process would work. Similar to the Calderon-related items, these changes are driven largely by state law requirements and are being made as a run-up to the city's housing element update process. Just to touch on the authority the city does retain under this is noted. This makes a whole variety of things permitted uses. Any of these uses that are listed will need to comply with all the requirements of the city's zoning ordinance, the various development standards. Also, as council is aware, the city has a very detailed and significant design review process that contain a whole series of findings that need to be made. And so any development, even as a permitted use under these requirements, any new development would need to be vetted through the city's design review process. And lastly, from a CEQA standpoint, if there's a design review application going through for new development, it's not exempt from CEQA, and it's going to have to do the necessary CEQA documentation. So the city still retains control and review authority, although obviously different given the various state preemptions. The last thing to note is an issue that came up during the housing element discussions is this question of making multiple family housing by right in medium and high density zones. And in this particular ordinance change going forward, that is not included in the wording. In other words, the modifications do not make multiple family housing a permitted use in the medium density zone. The high density zone already makes it permitted uses for a duplex or triplex, but anything more than that would need a use permit. And much of this really is driven by the fact that the city's medium density zone is somewhat unique in that it currently is where the vast majority of the city's single-family housing stock is located, but the upper range on the density limits is 16 units an acre. And there are very few, I'm not aware of any communities in the state where you have the single-family housing stock in a land use designation with the density range going that high. So to mix that with making multiple family by right would seem to be counterproductive in terms of maintaining the current character of those neighborhoods, et cetera. So we're going to be bringing that issue up with the state as part of the negotiation with the new housing element going forward. Obviously, we'll report back to council as to what feedback we get from the state. Staff is recommending that the city council adopt the proposed changes as a first reading. And once again, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any preliminary questions from council before I open it for public hearing?
And Mr. Mayor, if I might just interject one other thing to add on to what Mr. Cornelia said. these are all changes that the city has previously committed to in its certified housing element. So these are really from the city's standpoint, they're pure implementation of commitments that the city already has in its general plan.
All right. Is there any public comment?
Through the chair, I just have one question.
Oh, sure.
Do we have any examples of any supportive housing or transitional housing or even agricultural employee housing in the city of St. Helena?
I'm not aware of any. It's a good question. I'm not aware of any of that housing.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Does anybody wish to comment on this piece of legislation?
Good evening. I'm David Grable, and I'm here on behalf of Latinos Unidos de Napa. Appreciate the council approving agenda item 15. That was, I think, a win-win for everybody. This agenda item, I mean, you're going to allow homeless shelters, transitional housing, some other things in a range of zoning categories. I don't think that is likely to happen anywhere in the city. It's not. I don't know if people are concerned about that. I would say it's not something you should be concerned about. What's more important from the standpoint of Latinos Unidos, which includes farm workers, hotel, restaurant workers, working class people, is that the city strive to maintain a balance of jobs and housing. And if you build a hotel, if you approve a hotel, there has to be some accommodation in that process somehow, so that the housing impacts of that new hotel get acknowledged and addressed. That's, I think, what the basic concern of state law around housing elements is. That's certainly a basic concern of Latinos Unidos. There hasn't been a good balance of jobs and housing. A lot of new jobs and not a lot of new housing for people working in those jobs in St. Helena. It's bad for the environment. It's not healthy for business. Other considerations. Please, we'll work with you on this housing element. Try to make it a good one. If you want our input, we'd be more than happy to give it. We've worked with other jurisdictions in the county. We think everybody has profited from that, and we hope we can do the same thing in St. Helena. But we do want to strive for some kind of balance between jobs and housing in this city and throughout this whole region. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Yes.
Happy New Year, Mayor, Council, staff. My name is Oliver Caldwell, St. Helena. This is primarily for Victor. Maybe you could interpret 16B for me. Does it mean 12 units in the whole ag reserve in St. Helena, or is it per parcel? I don't understand what 12 units means.
Are you referring to the
16B?
16B.
I mean, I don't understand the parameters of those numbers. 12 units per parcel, per 5 acres, per 20 acres, per the old St. Helena?
Give more direction as to where you are in the ordinance.
Yeah, I guess I'm a little lost.
16B?
On the first page of the item,
If you look at
Okay,
the
let me just
it says
quickly
modify
flip.
the agricultural A20 and the AP zoning districts to allow permitted uses for the following: supportive housing, transitional housing, and agricultural employee housing consisting of up to 36 beds
Right,
or 12 units. Presumably that's per parcel.
Correct.
Or would it vary based on the size of the parcel, is I think the question you're...
So I'm just asking, you can build up to 12 units per parcel. That's all I wanted.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
Now, just to clarify, that's subject to existing zoning with respect to setbacks, FAR, height limit, design review, etc.
That's correct. Simply because something's a permitted use doesn't mean it doesn't still have to comply with the zoning. So you're correct.
Right.
Further public comment?
Yes, when Oliver just mentioned that, it occurred to me that given the nature of the beast out there these days, that some of this housing might be management housing. In fact, really fantastic management housing. And so I'm wondering if there's any way that this can be restricted to winery workers as opposed to corporate executives living in corporate quarters on winery property, which I could see it sort of bent around the thing to include that.
Yeah, just to clarify, I mean, the wording and the definition is for agricultural employee housing, and the reference is to a state definition of agricultural employees. So I don't believe there's a lot of room to move in terms of gaming that wording.
Okay. Any further public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment with respect to item 16 and request a motion.
Move to approve the zoning ordinance number 2015, whatever it's going to be. And this will be the first reading of the ordinance.
You're going to introduce it and approve it by title only.
Title only? Okay. So amending Title 17 zoning of the St. Helena Municipal Code by amending sections 17.04.160. Do I need to read them all? And
at Seek.
At Seek. Of the 2009 City of St. Helena housing element.
All right. Is there a second? I second it. Ms. Black?
Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Mayor Galbraith?
Yes.
Council members Doring?
Yes.
Kroll? And Pitts?
Yes.
That takes us to item 17, which I understand has been pulled.
Mr. Mayor and council members, the city clerk's office has had a miscommunication with the appellant, and actually we've tried to get the schedule down so we can get them on the agenda. They do not live here full time, and currently they're in Texas, but they can make the first meeting in February. So to accommodate the appellant and have them present to answer any questions, staff's recommendation is to pull the item and have it on the first meeting in February.
All right. No.
No. Okay.
That takes us to item 18, consideration of a resolution per mayor appointment and council majority vote appointing one applicant to fulfill the Planning Commission vacancy left by Brian Russell's resignation for the term ending June 30, 27. Ms. Black?
Again, Mayor and council members, as you know, Mr. Russell did resign from the position, which left a vacancy, so it's appropriate for the mayor and council to agree upon a replacement. So if you so choose, you can let me know who the replacement is and we can get them seated.
All right. I think under our rules, it says that the applicants for commission shall be interviewed by the city council. So I think I would begin by saying if any applicant wishes to be interviewed by the city council, it's not necessary. But if any applicant wish to be interviewed by city council, now's the time to come forward and be interviewed. Seeing that no applicant, Mr. Scolati, please please come to the forum, to the podium.
Hello. Wow, they fixed that. Sure, just wanted to answer any questions that weren't already on the application if anyone has any. Nope.
No questions.
Well, at least 3 of us are pretty pretty familiar with you.
Okay.
So,
All right. I just wanted to make sure.
How do you feel about trees, Mario?
I love trees, and I was at home listening to the whole dialogue on the widening, and appreciate what you were saying.
I have a question, Mario.
Yes.
Mr. Scalati.
Councilman
Welcome.
Goin.
Are there any particular issues that you can see that that the Planning Commission has not focused on yet that you think should be focused on?
Well, I think first and foremost, I think that, and I kind of, it reflects in my application, but because I've spent so much time in the general plan and whatever version of the final general plan comes down the pipe from the city council, I've probably spent more hours in the document than any other applicant, and I think that would give me a little better advantage interpreting as issues come before the Planning Commission. And essentially that's, I'd be open to learning as much as I can on the commission, but having fielded so many appeals and other aspects that came before the council during my time on the dais, I feel that I can really bring that perspective to the Planning Commission as far as things that we would want to create and things that we want to bring to the council. I mean, it would just be I would really just love to have an open dialogue and serve the council with any of the real desires of the community. I know we saw the winery ordinance come from the Planning Commission last year and some other things, but housing is going to be very important, and especially even seeing tonight's revisions of zoning and the ability for us to go a couple stories higher in some situations, provide more housing. I think those things and those densities, they really need to be addressed, and I'd be happy to work on things like that at the council's desire. So
we've received a number of emails, and one of the questions that occurred to me is whether it is appropriate and how you feel about a situation where you feel like maybe you represent a certain constituency or group in town. Can you talk about that a little bit, how you feel about the constituencies, if there is one that you feel that you can represent?
Sure, it's a good question. During the last election, it was a good campaign and everything, and 879 people voted for me, and I feel that's a really good show of confidence. I lost, and it was a good race, but it showed some confidence. It wasn't a total slaughtering. I felt so. I felt good about that. But as far as my constituency goes, I'm glad that there are Commissioner Parker and Commissioner Heil in my age group. And so I would definitely, like to contribute to that. But also, being a long-term business family in town, I'd like to really do my best to represent business. But also my age group, there's a lot that's going to come down the pipe with housing and affordability for my demographic, and particularly my age group. And then, of course, my aging relatives. These are all serious things that we have to take into account as we especially plan our housing and things like that.
Can you speak to the issue of that's come up before? You have an office downtown. Is that going to preclude you from being able to weigh in and vote and talk about issues affecting the downtown corridor, which is, of course, an important area of concern for all of us?
It is. It's a very good question. There were a couple times on council where I did recuse myself, but on overall policy and overall, guidance of certain decisions that are larger picture, I did not have to recuse myself, and I was able to contribute, and I think I could be able to do that on the Planning Commission as well. There's a lot of things that will be outside of that downtown corridor that are going to come into play, different developments, a handful of projects vineyard related that are south of town that I would be completely open to without any conflicts. So I will have to recuse myself if there are proximities to my office and the business, but I think I can contribute more holistically. So, but it is true.
No plans to move anytime in the future?
Huh?
No plans to move your office anytime in the future?
Unless Katie takes over my lease. But no.
Well, that's it for me. I appreciate your application. Thank you for your service to the community.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scalati.
All right.
Anybody else wish to speak? Yes, Ms. Goberstein.
Welcome to St. Helena.
Can you, yes.
Button.
Is it on?
Okay. Okay. My name is Mary Koberstein. My husband and I are recently new residents in St. Helena. We purchased a home on Pinot Way this summer. And I'm looking for a way to get involved in the community through a volunteer position, meet new people. I've found throughout my life that's kind of the best way to become part of the community. And so when I noticed this particular vacancy, it seemed sort of right up my alley, so I submitted an application. I admit that I have a steep learning curve of what is happening in the community and what some of the issues are, but I also have no particular bias about anything. You know, not having spent a lot of time debating the issues. I think what I would bring to this particular commission is kind of a long history experience in land use and planning in both the private sector and the public sector. I began my career as a city planner and worked in that position for about 10 years, ultimately as a director of community development in a council manager form of government, much like this. And I think one of the things I learned there, or some of the things I came to learn from the work in that particular arena, was the importance of community planning. Some communities don't spend enough time and attention on it. I also came to understand the processes very well, and I learned about the distinct responsibilities of the staff, the appointed commissioners, and then the elected officials. My interest in land use and zoning ultimately led me into law, where I worked for a number of years in private practice as an attorney. I specialized in land use and zoning and real estate transactions. And I represented a number of clients who sought local governmental approvals of various types, and attribute my success in that area primarily to my understanding of how communities work, the importance of ordinances, goals and policies in the community, to my knowledge of the process, ability to relate to the people on the other side of the table. I also did serve briefly as a member of the Zoning Board of Appeals in the community I lived in outside of suburban Chicago. And I recently, within the last 5 years, resigned my position as a general counsel of a private development company in Chicago. And I think what I picked up from that particular part of my career was really the contractual, the financial, and some of the other constraints that private developers face that people on boards and commissions may not be fully aware of when they're looking at their various projects. So I think I would bring a well-rounded perspective. I know you have a number of qualified and interested candidates. So I'd be honored to be appointed. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Does any member of the council have any questions?
You've answered many of the questions that I would have asked you. I appreciate your recitation of your background. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And again, welcome to St. Helena.
Thank you.
I'm just curious, the suburban, I mean, St. Helena is obviously a pretty small place. The suburban community that you mentioned, how large was that? Were there parallel sort of issues that are faced, or is it totally different? I mean, can you explain that?
I was the director of community development in the village of Wilmette. It is a population of 32,000, just north of the city of Chicago on Lake Michigan. At the time I was there, we had housing issues to contend with. We were working on revising our comprehensive plan, rewrote the zoning ordinance. I think communities by and large face a lot of the same issues. You know, how they choose to address them might be unique to the particular community. I moved here from the other side of the country, the state of Maine, where we lived for about 12 years, from a very small town, not too unlike St. Helena. We had a lot of tourism, good food, cold weather. And in my experience as a lawyer, I certainly practiced in tiny communities, large cities like Chicago. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Mayor and City Council, thank you. I failed to put in the application that Vernon and I moved here November 1st of 1971, so we've spent 42 years in this community and been engaged in many of the activities in this community. And why I think that's important is because we've become just a little fragment of this whole community, and we love this community, and we want to make sure it goes forward in a very positive way. I've been involved for many, many years in the industry. In fact, I just completed the 49th harvest in California, and I realized that to be a good farmer wasn't sufficient to continue your business. You had to get involved. I've been involved with, if you looked at my resume, for many, many years on many different boards. I have contributed to those. The only thing I've done here in the county was I was on the Napa River Watershed Task Force, which we met for 2 years, 50 meetings, 4-hour meetings. It was a very diverse group, and we came up with some very good policies related to erosion control, and I felt like that was a very good thing. I've also served on the WAC, and what I did was I said, why? Somebody asked me, why did you apply? And that's a hard question, because it's a little bit confusing, because it's going to be time consuming, and yet I have the time, I want to do it, and I'm very interested in making sure that the city moves forward in a positive way. I wrote down here that I started reading the preliminary land use elements to preserve to preserve St. Helena's rural small town character, and I've dedicated myself to work towards that preservation. I will say that one of the things that will come about from that is that there's going to be a lot of changes as we go on. When we moved here, you could make a U-turn in downtown St. Helena anytime you wanted, and you couldn't find a restaurant to save your life. Of course, I've been in the wine business. When we moved here, there were 36 wineries. Robert Mondavi was the most recent winery, and 19,000 acres of vineyard. Today, there is over 500 wineries in Napa Valley, and 46,000 acres of vineyard. When I was on the task force, I said there'd never be over 40,000 acres. But the reason for this Napa Valley has become world famous, as you know, and that is going to influence St. Helena. We're in the heart of the wine district, and I don't see the wine district and not being a major part of what's going on here in St. Helena. And so I'd like to answer any questions you have. One thing I want to say is that I have a new perspective after I started reading some of the regulations about the work that you all do, And I appreciate the work you do, and appreciate the work that the Planning Commission does. I'm used to sitting in a nice chair with a glass of wine, and sometimes I might go to sleep on you, but so if I get appointed, I won't be able to do that. But can I answer any questions?
I'm curious, given that you've been here for a really long time, what do you think are the biggest challenges we face that you'll be able to help guide us through while you would, if you were to serve in the Planning Commission over, say, the next couple of years or decade?
Well, I wrote some things down here. I'm glad you asked me. I think this is both for the City Council and the Planning Commission. I think that we need to address the City Hall and the Police Department. Vernon and I took a tour of that, and something needs to happen there, in my opinion. And we need to work at that, and we need to be transparent, and we need to get people together that can agree to this, and then maybe we got to find a way to have a plan. Then we have to fund the plan, right? And I don't know what that plan is, but that's one thing I think should happen. The other thing I wrote down is we need to do something with the Adams Street property. We paid $3 million for that 5.6 acres. We borrowed $2 million. So before we're all done, in 6 years from now, we're going to have that paid off at well over $4 million. I have no problem with the vineyard that's there, but financially, it absolutely makes no sense, okay, to have a vineyard there. And so I think we need to really address that issue. And it could be mixed use. It could be, we could put the City Hall there if we could afford it. We could put the entertainment centers there. But I think that's something that it's going to take a lot of effort to move forward there. And I don't think we can keep that in a vineyard that generates $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year in income. You know, we paid $374,000 or whatever it is per acre for that property. So that's another thing that I think we need to look at. I put downtown. By the way, I have an office in the Cornerstone building. And I'm very kind of confused.
Is that where Cook in Cook Tavern?
Yeah. Which is, kind of nice for me, but but
I'd like to move there too.
Yeah. People talk about being local serving. I would like that. At the same time, I don't know how many jewelry stores. I'm very conflicted about this, and I think that's a major issue that needs to be resolved. And I don't have a solid answer, but I think that it's something that has to be well thought out and a plan made, rather than having somebody apply and then get turned down and come to you people. I mean, there must be some way that we could develop a plan for the downtown. I was thinking about, for 30 years we fought the wine train, right? And now we endorse the wine train unloading people. And I think there's a lot of vibrancy downtown. And so if you want to be a local serving, I brought all my Christmas presents downtown. Does that count? So, and then I re-looked at the winery definition ordinance, and in my opinion, I wouldn't touch it. I think it's done. For small wineries, in my opinion, it's done. And I think
as it exists today, you mean?
As what I read, as it's written. Now there might be some nuances in there I've missed, but I think that we should stick with that. That's my opinion. And also, so how does change fit into this? And the last big one I wrote down here in big letters is water. Because whatever the whatever we do in terms of potential growth, if there's another end goes in or whatever, we have a plan for that water use, and we have a well, and we have the reservoir, and we buy city water from Napa. But my concern is in my history, working with the State Water Resources Control Board, we're not going to be able to increase the dam. That's what I think that would be very unlikely. So that water storage is what it is. Wells, we can drill more wells, but as you know, statewide, depends on where you are. We might be in a good well district. The state is now going to put some restrictions on well drilling, but the wells are one thing. And then, of course, we're buying water from the city of Napa, but how long is that going to last? Because, Napa's growing pretty rapidly. And so it seems to me that I don't have a solution to this, but I'm just worried about if it doesn't rain and snow, we'll be in the fourth year of drought. And so there's going to be a lot of pressure. And when is that going to end, or is it ever going to end? And at the same time, we have the new bond. We're going to build new reservoirs, and that's fine. But the facilities we have statewide furnished were built for 20 million people. Now we have 38 million, and so I just think that everything the Planning Commission does and that you all do, we have to think, what is the long-term? Where's the long-term water source? Maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's a big issue.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steinhauer.
Yes, Mr. Smithers?
Hi there. Mark Smithers, Vallejo Street, and I think I sent you guys all an advance copy of this statement, but I'll go ahead and read it for the public. You have my application, so I'm going to limit my redundancies and hopefully not repeat too much there. We've raised 2 boys in St. Helena, and I plan on living out my life here. And as such, the future of St. Helena is pretty important to me, and my wife and my kids, one of which lives here full time and works for the St. Helena Fire Department, as well as Calistoga Fire Department. I have the time, the energy, and the flexibility required to fulfill the responsibilities of the position, and also to the folks of St. Helena. I want to be a part of improving life in St. Helena, not just the life of one person or one entity, but for the greater good of the entire community. There are rules and laws that need to be considered and reconsidered. Many of them are objective, but some of them are subjective. We have the right and the responsibility to manage where and how town changes and develops. I will strive to determine what is appropriate for our entire town or a neighborhood within the context of the general plan and zoning, etc. The Planning Commission can be proactive, working with City Council and the City Manager while setting an agenda for town planning, not just reacting to every request. We have a number of issues the Planning Commission will likely be involved in at one level or another over the next couple of years. To name a few, residential lot coverage ratio, which appears to be resulting in too many second homes, affordable and moderately priced housing, lack of local serving businesses, heavy truck traffic through residential streets costing millions of dollars to repair, business development in our neighborhoods, alternative local routes or lack thereof to improve town circulation. The Planning Commission can work to resolve these issues proactively, reduce uncertainty, and calm anxiety. I believe every business proposal brought to the Planning Commission should include an economic analysis. I'm analytical. I ask a lot of why and what questions. Thank you for your consideration. I hope to serve St. Helena.
Any further questions of Mr. Smithers?
Can you describe some of your background, if any, working in a group process where you have to deliberate and oftentimes come to a consensus?
Just about every day at work. at Trinchero Family Estates on the executive team and the strategic, management of that company. It is all about collaboration and not, being bullheaded or pig-headed and not listening to others. I certainly think that's where you have to, that's where you are successful. I've been a coach for Little League teams. You can't just, order kids around and do things like that. Soccer, I was on the budget committee. I've been on the bond oversight committee for the school district. Those were all areas where we had to work together and come to a good conclusion, positive conclusions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Hi, I'm Tracy Sweeney, 1407 Kearney Street. I've submitted a full application, so also for the interest of time, I won't go through those details, but I'll open questions. I think for the public, I believe what I bring that I hope is a little bit unique is I think I have a nice balanced view. I am not, I think someone brought up a constituent question before, but I feel that the issues before us really have some broad answers to them. I think that we do need to strongly look at housing, but I don't think housing can be used to over-encumber development. I think that we need to bring those two questions together and try to make things work. I think that we are, the Planning Commission should not be an activist commission. I think we should be proactive, but I also believe that we do have to work through the general plan and work through our ordinances and our codes, and it will be our job to enforce and apply those things intelligently. I think what I bring is a nice balanced view. I'm very open-minded. I think I have good intellect and I have good reasoning skills, and I ask good questions. And I believe that coming into this open-minded, I have been in St. Helena 15 years. I've seen a lot of change, but at the same time, I think I really do have an appreciation for why we are here, what we want the city to be like, and what we want to protect. But I also am realistic and to know that to do those things, we need to be able to pay for it. And so we need to be open-minded and welcoming to businesses coming in that can bring revenues to our city and to our town. At the same time, protecting and holding dear what our citizens love about St. Helena. So I think I bring a balance and an outlook, and we'll view things through both those lenses collectively and I think productively. So with that, with questions.
Are there any questions of Ms. Luna?
Through the chair, are there any particular, you may have touched down on it already in general, but are there any particular issues that you think that the Planning Commission has not focused on that should be focused on?
I don't know that they haven't focused on the idea of diversity on Main Street, but I think it's becoming more important. So I think it's going to move up in the priority list of things. I think that we have traditionally looked at each applicant sort of in a one-off, not necessarily a vacuum, but I don't think we've looked at it in a broader scope. And so I think as the Planning Commission gets on seats at the table with other entities within St. Helena that are trying to look at a longer-term view for what downtown looks like and retail diversity and other businesses coming into town, I think that the Planning Commission should have a voice and should be an active participant in that. They won't necessarily be the only voice, but I think it's something that's important to consider. So it's not a new issue, but I think it's an issue that it should have more focus and more attention.
Do you have any particular thoughts or opinions about lot coverage issues or floor area ratio issues in St. Helena? Does that strike a chord with you, or is that something that you're not really focused on right now?
I'm not really familiar with the law, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But I do think that we need to be looking we need to make the most of the resources that we have. So if that means that we need to add density in certain areas, then I think it makes sense to do so, but not sacrificing the communities and the neighborhoods that we live in. So I think that nothing can be off the table. I think if you're going to make good decisions and you're going to have a reasonable and open-minded approach, you have to entertain ideas and then make decisions based on the facts and not based on fear or speculation. So open to new ideas, and I think that's one that's going to have to be considered as we look at housing. So.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Nope. All right. Is there any public comment beyond the applicants? Keeping in mind that members of the council received emails in support of all the applicants, I believe.
Oliver Caldwell, St. Helena. Well, my comment is just kind of indirect, and that is I think this is a theory that I have, that if you have a terms of 2 years, you'll have a much greater pool of applicants applying for these positions. As witness here, there's a lot of qualified people here. And it's ironic that last year I made a proposal before the planning commissioner to the commission to have maybe if some of these seats revolve every 2 years instead of 4 years, like the House of Representatives in Congress. And it was ironic that the person who was most adamant against my proposal was Brian Russell, who made it to 2 years. So I was just making a suggestion that maybe if we made a couple slots that were 2-year slots for the Planning Commission, we would always have a great pool of people to choose from, because I think the diversity is really important for this town. And I noticed that I think that a lot of people would apply for the position if it was 2 years, and then you would have a greater pool of people. And a greater pool of people as talented as this would provide the solutions and the answers, and maybe some creative insight in going forward and handling all the complicated issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further public comment?
Hello again, Chuck Vondra, Santa Elena, Star Avenue, looking for a tree, but I think it's great too that there's so many people are applying for this position. I myself applied several years back and was happy to see a lot of other folks, and I didn't get the position, but I think it was very well appointed. And I'm especially gladdened. I think last fall there was a dearth of people applying, so suddenly there's an interest, and I think that's great. I would like to make a personal recommendation that I think from what I've heard tonight that, again, a lot of good and talented and experienced people, but I would encourage the council to strongly consider Mario Scarlatti for two main reasons. One, his experience here sitting on the council, going through the general plan has really given him a deep insight into what's going on in St. Helena. He's lived here for a long time, so he's really well versed in what's going on here. And maybe even more importantly is I think it's critical in this community that we have a younger demographic represented. I'm having trouble getting my daughter into Little League, girls Little League, because I don't think we have enough coaches, people. We're losing that sort of younger generation that used to be there when a lot of us grew up, that coaches and that younger infrastructure that we need. So I think appointing somebody like Mr. Scarlatti sends a message to his generation that we welcome that voice and we want that voice in our community. And it's important that we engage and encourage that generation to be part of government. So I'm here to endorse and support Mr. Scarlatti. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right. So it falls on me as mayor to make the appointment. It's done by motion, so I will seek a second. Obviously, I've given a lot of thought, and I agree with Mr. Caldwell's comments that this time we're lucky. We have a splendid group of applicants, and the choice is not an easy one. But having given it thought, having listened to the conversations this evening, my nomination is for Tracy Sweeney. And the question is whether I have a second to that nomination. I'll invite a discussion after, but I don't want a discussion unless there's a second, because there's no point in having a discussion unless there's a second to my nomination. Sure.
Oh, I was talking about a discussion of all the candidates.
We'll do that after.
Is there a second to my nomination?
I'll second.
All right. Discussion.
No, we do some discussion.
I'll call for a roll call after any discussion, and maybe there is none.
I agree with you and with Oliver that we've got a great group of candidates, and as always, I want to, for those that aren't appointed to this position, to remind everyone that we do have turnover and there are other roles that people can play, and it's not an easy decision for any of us, but I'm so glad to see the turnout that we have. I think all of them could serve quite well.
All right.
They definitely all could.
I agree with all of that. It's just I have to make a choice and make an appointment, and it's subject to council approval. And so at this point, absent further discussion.
Well, I do want to talk a little bit more about what I would be looking for. Obviously, it's the mayor's nomination. I gave it some thought, and so I think it's important for folks in the community to know, well, what was Paul Doring thinking when he was looking at these applications? So I just jotted down a list. In particular, I'm looking at the dynamics and current makeup of the Planning Commission as it sits now, looking at each of those individuals, including a couple of young 30-year-olds or 30 to 35-year-olds. So I think that group is well represented. I'm looking at the potential for conflicts of interest, and we want to try to reduce that as much as possible. I think it's critical that we look at temperament and demeanor. Folks on these commissions and on this council have to represent the entire city in a professional manner. I'm looking at the ability to work in a group process, to sometimes be humble enough to put your own sense of self-importance behind for the betterment of the city. We have to encourage folks who are interested in benefiting the entire city and not any particular constituency. That is critically important to me. The notion of teamwork and humility and strong character are always critically important to me. They should be reflected in all of us and on all of the Planning Commission. Experience is obviously critical, and qualifications in general in terms of intellect, brain power. I don't think that is an issue with any of you. I think it takes a lot to apply, so I want to commend you all for doing that. I was on the losing end of an appointment process just a couple years ago, so, and here I am now. But those are the kinds of things that I was looking at, and to some degree, some of you, I believe, fill all of those roles. Some of you fill many of those roles. I think we're blessed to have all of you apply, but that sort of was what I was looking at.
I would add to that list, and I think it's a great way to frame it. I think understanding of land use and law is coming in with that experience can offer one a great sort of jumpstart into the process.
Agreed.
You eliminate a huge amount of learning curve, but also being here for a long period of time and understanding the issues and where things have gone historically can also be really important.
Agreed.
I hope you were listening to that, Ms. Koberstein, because there will be a further opportunity, and you have great background for this purpose, without any doubt. But in any event, Ms. Black, would you call the roll, please?
Mel Grabreth?
Yes.
Councilmember Doreen?
Yes.
Kroll?
Yes.
Pitts?
Yes.
Mayor, Vice Mayor White?
Yes.
Thank you for all of your applications and for your public service.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me see where we are.
One last thing.
One more to go.
One more to go. And it did say consent calendar. Oh, two. Item 19 is city council assignments to various city and Napa County boards and commissions. Cindy Black is a staff person on this, but I've been over this with Cindy, and I think if you'll indulge me just a little bit here.
Well, it looks like they're all you.
Well, maybe by operation of law.
There is one thing that's missing, and I don't know so I'm on the Upper Valley Waste Management Board, which is a Form 700 board, and it got inadvertently left off here, and I don't know if we can put that on, or if because it wasn't noticed, we can't.
My feeling would be, Mr. Brown, that since it wasn't noticed, that it would have to come up on a subsequent agenda item to have her confirm for that specific board.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew. I think it was just an omission.
On the consent calendar.
Oh, okay. And Peter, I think, is the alternate.
Right, we apologize for that. That was an oversight. I have to say that Ms. Black put a tremendous amount of effort in putting this whole list together, a list that had never existed, called all of her colleagues. She worked on it for weeks, and so we did miss one, and we apologize, but I just wanted to thank her for her work on that.
Yes, thank you. I didn't mean to at all criticize you. I just wanted people to be aware of it.
Well done.
All right. With respect to what I understand to be called the Monrovia Committee, it sounds like something out of the former Yugoslavia. But
it sounds like a nursery to me.
But
I know.
That, I would request that the council confirm myself and Councilmember Pitts, assuming he wishes to continue.
Absolutely.
Any further discussion on that by council?
No.
Cindy, call the roll, please, on.
Although I would
Oh, do we need to, do we need a motion on each one, or just all together once we're done? All right. Napa Valley Tourism Corporation, St. Helena Tourism Improvement District. I would hope that Councilmember Kroll would continue with respect to that.
Yeah.
She will.
I don't think we have an alternate for me on that, but I don't know that we need one.
You need an alternate?
I don't know.
Does anybody wish to be an alternate?
Because Jennifer goes as well. So.
I'd be happy to if you need one,
All
and
right.
if you want to look into it, and if you need one, then put me on it.
All right. Possibly Pitts. Okay. Napa County Gang and Youth Violence. I would volunteer for that one unless some other council member feels strongly. A couple of reasons. One is that it seems to me appropriate that the mayor be on that committee, but beyond that also, that committee meets, generally speaking, Wednesday afternoons on the same Wednesday that the NCTPA meets, and both are meeting in Napa, so it's pretty easy for me going to an NCTPA meeting to then move over to the Gang and Youth Violence Commission meeting, which comes after hopefully the NCTPA meeting is over.
Which it does, because it starts at 4:30.
Okay, so let's.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That seems fine. All right. With respect to the NCTPA, I serve on it. I would hope the council would confirm continuing Mr. White on it. And I believe Ms. Kroll is a alternate, and I think we need one more alternate. So, Paul?
My name is not on this list at all, so I'd be happy to fill in. We can come back in 6 months if someone gets tired of serving on that. Yes, of course, I would be happy to serve in that role.
Okay.
I love the city.
All right. And then we've got.
Although, I was going to say,
Then we
you'd
have
be
what is
great for the
affectionately
Monrovia.
known as the WIC, which is the Napa County Watershed Information Center and Conservancy. Peter,
That's a mouthful.
Peter is the representative to the WIC. And when I was on the GRAC, we had joint meetings with the WIC. I can tell you that the WIC benefits from long service because there's a lot of technical information that relates to groundwater and water issues that come before the WIC. So I would hope that Councilmember White would continue.
I will.
All right. So given the consensus here, I'm not.
Is there an alternate needed on the WIC or not?
No.
Okay.
No.
I was just going to suggest if Paul needs a job, because he's not on anything, that he could be on the, I mean, if you wanted to cede your position on Monrovia, since his children are in the district and his wife is a teacher, he might be a natural
And I would be happy to
person for
serve in that role, Mr. Mayor. I know you have a lot of obligations, so.
But I don't mean to rock the boat or anything. I was just
No.
trying to look for a spot for him.
But unless it's required, I don't know
no,
if it's the
I
mayor
think
required.
Ann volunteered for it.
I don't know the answer to that, quite frankly. I assumed that the mayor should be on the Monrovia committee.
I don't know the answer to that either.
I know a lot of the appointments are, it's just an automatic. The mayor sits.
And isn't that one where?
I would definitely have to revisit that one.
All right. Why don't we?
We could bring that back at the next meeting with the waste management as well.
Okay, very good. Let's do that.
Like.
So otherwise, are you set on where we stand? Do we need a formal motion, or are we?
Yes,
also?
please.
All right. Let me see if I can do it. Unless some other member of the council wishes to try.
Give it a shot.
All right, here we go. Chair moves.
Sometimes
try
when you read,
again.
Alan, yeah.
All right.
You have to-
I knew I was going to fail a little bit my first evening here. The chair moves that the mayor and Councilmember Pitts, as alternate, be on the Monrovia committee subject to reconsideration. That Councilmember Kroll be on the Napa Valley Tourism Corporation, St. Helena Tourism Improvement District Committee. That the mayor serve on the Napa County Gang and Youth Violence Commission. That that the mayor, by statute in any event, and Mr. White, Councilmember White, serve on the NCTPA with the alternates being Councilmember Kroll and Councilmember Doring, and that Councilmember White serve on the WIC.
So I'll second that.
Just one, no, you don't, but one correction is that on Monrovia, I don't think there's an alternate. I think we're both primary on that.
Right,
It's
right,
two
right.
seats.
Okay.
And just to answer your question, there's LAFCO, my alternate is actually is Napa City.
Right.
Oh.
So.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor, on the NCTPA, the alternates, are the alternates filling in for a particular person? How would that work?
It
And
works
should we identify that
when
now?
somebody can't go, they call you.
Well, I know. Okay.
Oh,
well,
oh.
you have two alternates here for the two.
Correct.
And which one is which?
I don't think
So
I don't think it matters.
It doesn't matter?
I don't think we should specify it.
I think it would be easier if it didn't matter.
See,
Because it gives us more
and
flexibility.
you rotate if if
sure.
That's fine.
I mean, I just think it gives us more flexibility because we've had instances where nobody can make it.
Fair enough.
All right.
So
Now, Ms. Black, are you more or less satisfied with where we are?
I need a who made the second?
I made the
White,
second.
okay. Shall I do roll call?
Absolutely.
All right, Mayor Galbraith,
Yes.
Vice Mayor White,
Yes.
Councilmember Doring,
Yes.
Kroll,
yes.
Pitts.
yes.
Very well. Okay, this gets us to
one
item
more.
20, and the staff person assigned to this item is Ms. Black.
Again. Tonight before you is a consideration of resolution entering into a contract with Kaizen InfoSource for records and information management services. First, I'd like to just let you know that Kaizen has extensive experience with public agencies. In fact, I'd like to point out that they have recently done records management for our neighbors, such as Napa, American Canyon, and Concord. So basically, we're piggybacking on them, and they're phenomenal. There's a need for this in St. Helena. The volume of paperwork and electronic information is just, it's just overwhelming. And so we need improved management and protection of our electronic information. We need improved transparency of our city operations. And we're going to capitalize on the availability and the use of technology through them. So the benefits will be we're going to have increased efficiency of city staff in locating and finding information to provide to other staff members, but also to the public. And we're going to have a central repository, and this is going to give us some guidelines in helping set this up. And it's just going to be wonderful to have the increased availability and have a policy in place. So in closing, I just want to point out that they're going to be giving us a roadmap for future improvements, and I just can't say enough about the company and the help that they're going to give St. Helena. So, and before you is a resolution that I've included additional information. There's 3 components to the contract. They're going to be providing an assessment. They're going to be working with every department. Every department's going to have a voice in helping create this policy. And so then eventually we're going to end up with a roadmap that basically is going to map out the next few years on getting us on track. And it's going to help us for years to come. So if you have any questions, I'd love to answer.
Well, are there any preliminary questions of Ms. Black before I open the public hearing?
Well, I just have a statement that I think we desperately need this because having been on the city council for a long time now, it's very difficult to locate records sometimes when you need them, and our records management definitely needs help.
We've had instances of water agreements that had been submitted by owners of properties that we couldn't find and had to recreate, and I totally agree with you, Sharon.
Is there any public comment with respect to this?
I have to comment since I spend a huge amount of time on the city's website searching for stuff. Specifically, just to give you an example, I tried to look up Planning Commission meeting minutes for 2014, and here we are in 15, and not a single one is listed online. So no one knows in town how anyone last year voted on the Planning Commission, unless you watch every single video. And the online searches only go back a couple years. You're lucky if you get 2009, and certainly nothing much before that. So this makes entire histories of issues vanish, which is not good, which makes all the issues then become kind of political footballs now without anything to anchor it. No truth comes out. And so I really hope that, I'm really glad that this is happening, but I really hope that whoever does the website is tied closely technologically to the people that do the records management, because I can see where unless that's set up from the beginning by design, that there could be a breakdown between the two parties. And I don't know who does the website, but it needs to function. It not only needs to be there, but it needs to function. And so that could be a hole or a crack that doesn't get addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further public comment? I'll close the public hearing. Is there any further council discussion?
So is the intention that we would ultimately have a database that could be fully accessed through the web by anyone?
You bet.
That'd
You
be
bet.
great.
That is one of my platforms. Is I want a fantastic transparency page so the public has access. And the other thing is too, we are very understaffed. We just don't have a lot of staff to do the research and to provide these documents, which for the city clerk's department, that is, I have to have the records available for public view. And so in this transparency page, I want to teach the community to have a lot more self-service, but to have all these records, any public records, to be, more readily available. So that's a big
That'd be
goal.
great.
I think it'll be great.
And it will be addressed in the assessment.
And as a point of clarification to Ms. Erickson's comment, I do think some time ago we ratified that the minutes would be video, essentially, for Planning Commission
That is true.
meetings, and we don't actually take minutes the old-fashioned traditional way and post them or even have them. I think it's all
They
video.
are action minutes.
If we have to transcribe them, we transcribe at that point.
So yes, it was approved that council made the videos of the meetings, the actual minutes, but we do have action minutes. But there's been a little disconnect with getting a lot of information up on the web, the way the current web setup is.
It's set up so you can go, you don't have to scroll through everything. You can say, I want to go to this item, and then it'll jump in the video to that item, correct?
But, well, it's not.
In theory.
Supposed to.
In theory.
Yeah,
In
right.
theory.
Yeah.
So we'll fix that too,
Well,
hopefully.
Well, I don't think anybody doubts that this is most worthwhile and should result in a very important transparency reflection in a good way on the city once it's done, and hopefully will make the city clerk's office more efficient and have you less tied into searching for old paper records. From long experience as a trial and appellate lawyer coming out of a law firm, I cannot tell you how important record management is, and the resources that at least my organization always put it into records management, because without it, at some point you do lose your institutional memory and you make mistakes, and so it's essential. But in any event, at this point, if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
I would move approval.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Ms. Black?
Councilmember Kroll?
Yes.
Doring?
Yes.
Pitts?
Yes.
Vice Mayor White? Mayor Galbraith?
Emphatically yes.
Oh, thank you so very much.
That concludes our meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Thank you, council, for indulging me in my first meeting presiding as mayor.
Well done.
Well done.
Cindy, if it's possible,